This huge complex of buildings in West Africa looked more like a secret military facility than a biochemistry institute. That morning there was nothing bad. Everyone was going about their business. Suddenly a siren sounded in the corridors. The corridor that led to the virus lab was littered with the corpses of the uniformed men guarding the building. They were all covered in blood. Losing consciousness, one of the biochemists in a lab white coat continued to hold the transparent sample cube in his hands. The stranger who started it all walked over to him and carelessly took the container of the deadly virus. Holding the sample cube with one hand, Chen Haoshin reported to the management that he had managed to obtain the blood virus pathogen. The SWAT officer was engrossed in the conversation, so he didn't see that one of the guards had managed to get into the lab. A shot rang out. The young man was horrified to see that the bullet had struck the virus container and shattered it, leaving only shards in his hands. Chen Haoshin didn't even want to imagine the dire consequences of a damaged container. Fighters from his unit ran into the laboratory. In the meantime, the young man tackled the enemy and shot him in the head. He demanded that the staff step back immediately. Unfortunately, he is already infected. It could be fatal. In the same second, Chen Haoshin felt his body change. The virus that had infiltrated him had changed the DNA formula. The introduction of the virus pathogen proved to be very painful. The commando bent in half from the intense pain, coughing up blood. 3 years had passed since the incidents. The young man was now working as a janitor for a company in Fuyang City. He managed to get a job on the night shift. This allowed Chen Haoshin to work quietly in complete solitude, humming songs. The guy proudly wore his blue uniform with the company badge. He was happy to be working at Cloud Fuyang Company. After finishing cleaning all the offices, the young man breathed a sigh of relief. He had done his job, so he could go home. Walking through the office, Chen Haoshin was surprised to find that the screen on one of the office seats was still on. Someone had not turned off the computer. He headed for the table, rebuking the staff for being wasteful. Electricity is too expensive. We need to save money. At the monitor on, the guy froze in surprise. He couldn't believe that someone would allow himself to watch such a thing at work. The picture made the young man blush. He turned away, his hand clutching his nose, which was bleeding profusely. Suddenly, a girl wearing a black skirt appeared behind Chen Haoshin's back. She angrily asked who he was and what he was doing in the office. The guy turned to the stranger in surprise and explained that he was the new janitor, and now he was on night duty. The girl in the business suit thoughtfully asked what the janitor was doing in the company at this hour. His time was up. Suddenly she saw that the computer was on, and the brat was quietly watching videos with adult content. Hearing the sounds on the screen, the girl immediately blushed and asked how he was not ashamed to watch movies with such content. Chen Haoshin tried to explain that he was simply misunderstood, but the beautiful woman wouldn't even listen to him. A yellow pillow with the image of some mythical beast flew at the boy's head with a whistling sound. He realized that he wouldn't have time to dodge. A soft object hit him on the nose. The janitor shrieked with indignation. It was too much. He didn't deserve to be treated like this. Chen Haoshin angrily said that he was in a lot of pain. The girl accused him of perversion. Taking advantage of the fact that no one is around, he watches all sorts of nasty things. She yelled that the young man would be fired tomorrow and demanded that he turn in his name tag. Holding his bruised nose, the guy indignantly said that there had been a misunderstanding. She should just listen to him. Lin Yumu angrily stomped her foot in a black patent stiletto-heeled shoe and wailed that a misunderstanding was out of the question. Raising her tone, she shouted that she had caught the young man in the hot hand, yet he still had the nerve to deny it. Chen Haoshin bowed his head and said that he was very sorry. In fact, he was just passing by. He didn't approve of such actions either. The young man said thoughtfully that he had just decided to turn off his computer, but it all turned against him. The guy raised an eyebrow in surprise and asked why the girl got so excited when she saw him at that computer. He speculated that she was actually watching those videos herself at her computer and forgot to turn it off. Lin Yumu's lips curled up in anger. She simply didn't have the words. This dirty janitor allows himself to think such things. The girl jumped on the employee, straightening her leg, and yelled that he was just trying to benefit himself and was talking nonsense. To her surprise, Chen Haoshin deftly dodged her lightning strike and caught her leg. He could easily beat her up if he wanted to. The young man frowned and said he wasn't interested in whether it was her computer or not, but it was too low to be insulted without figuring it out. Lin Yumu couldn't believe it. She had been studying martial arts since childhood, and this guy was easily able to avoid her punch. The janitor came up to her and threw her on the table. The girl blushed with shame. Her face was like the face of a heroine on the screen. Chen Haotian smirked gloatingly. He said that he really liked this pose. There was something intriguing about it. The night guest blushed thickly and asked angrily with fear what the pervert was up to this time. The young man stated that she insults him too often. It was time to show some real perversion. He leaned over and pressed the girl's shoulders against the table. It was late evening. Only a few office windows still had a glimmer of light. Lin Yumu's angry shouts could be heard outside the building. The young man took a black marker in his hands and asked the girl not to move. In a few minutes, everything was ready. The beautiful woman had insults painted on both cheeks. She shouted angrily through her tears that she would make him pay for the humiliation and tried to hit him. Chen Haoshin at this moment stepped back a little and took a picture of the enraged girl as she attacked. He said he could quickly glorify his abuser if he posted her picture on the company's forum. After waving goodbye to her, the young man walked out with his bucket and reminded her that she had attacked him first. Lin Yumu glared angrily at him. She brought all her anger down on the computer desk and slammed her fist into it. The surface of the desk vibrated from her impact. The girl cried out in tears that she would make her abuser pay the bill. She, Lin Yumu, swears that she will. The guest's screams echoed through the office corridors, but the boy wasn't going to listen to her. He knew she wouldn't dare to hurt him. After the night shift, Chen Haoshin went straight to his home. His dwelling was in a poor area of the city. Everything here was gray and dull. The windows of the house were barred to prevent robberies, which were frequent here. When he entered the room, the young man slammed the door glumly. A torn calendar and a cracked mirror hung by the front door. The entire refrigerator was filled with canned beer. The shelves of the door were stacked with medicines and syringes. The guy took one of the cans in his hands and pulled on his tongue with relish, anticipating the pleasure. Suddenly he felt a change in his body. It was the same feeling he'd experienced 3 years ago. Something was changing his DNA. The painful sensation caused Chen Haoshin to squint his eye. The beer slipped out of his hands, but he didn't care about that. He reached over to the side shelf of syringes and picked one up at random. He always did that when he was on edge. The guy drove the needle into his left bicep and squeezed the entire contents of the syringe into his arm, overpowering the pain. After a while, he felt much better. Only now did he realize that he had injected himself with the Ebola virus. In any case, it's not enough. In a few days, I'll have to visit the Biochemistry Institute again and take a couple more samples. The boy remembered the guards at that institute with interest. He wondered if they had updated their defense system. Chen Haoshin remembered how he got infected 3 years ago. He shouted to the staff not to come close and demanded to find a car. One of his subordinates asked with fear in his voice what the squad leader intended to do now. The young man admitted that this virus is deadly and there is no cure. He must prevent the spread in a deserted place. That day, Chen Haoshin asked to tell the management that he needed a vacation. Right now, he couldn't return to the team. The boy could not believe that 3 years had already passed since the attack. Because of the infection, the young man had to live in the forest for about a year. He was not able to get rid of the effects of the virus, but now he is no longer a danger to others. The young man was constantly injecting himself with other viruses to ease the pain. He had a trash can full of used syringes by his desk. Closing his eyes, Chen Haoshin asked himself how much longer this would continue, and replied that no one knew for sure. It was better to just sleep now anyway. He nuzzled his nose into the pillow, knowing he needed to get his strength up for work. To the young man's surprise, he could not fall asleep. The familiar painful sensations appeared in his body again. The boy opened his eyes with indignation. He was furious that the serum hadn't worked properly this time. Chen Haoshin angrily clenched his fists. He just couldn't believe that the Ebola virus was useless. The young man had a very strange feeling that that virus had somehow mutated. A new sensation appeared in his body. All night the guy had been restlessly tossing and turning in his sleep, so he didn't even feel like he'd fallen off the bed onto the floor. The warm rays of the morning sun woke up the young man, who was still lying on the floor with his eyes closed. A clear liquid flowed out of his mouth. Chen Haotian dared to open his eyes and looked around in surprise. From the looks of it, he was still in the room. Standing up from the floor, the boy was surprised he was still alive. Yesterday, he had been convinced that he would not live to see the morning because of the virus. Suddenly, the young man saw something that looked like a virus molecule on his t-shirt and was even more surprised. All around him, various molecules were floating around the room. He knew for sure that they could only be seen through a microscope. Chen Haoshin reached out his hand to touch one of them. He remembered that he had never seen virus molecules in person. His fingers were getting closer and closer to the molecule. The virus remained suspended in the air and didn't even think of disappearing. As soon as his fingers touched the virus, the molecule spread throughout the guy's body, framing him with a blue aura. The young man sat down on the floor and looked closely at the molecules floating in the air. He assumed he was seeing the viruses he had been injecting into himself for the past 2 years. Chen Haoshin smiled. He realized that he could absorb bacteria without harming his body and use it. The young man looked around and picked up a scrap of iron pipe. This material was suitable for his experience. The guy closed his eyes and concentrated, urging all the viruses in the room to attack the iron pipe in his hand. Opening his eyes, Chen Haoshin smiled. He saw that the idea had worked. The microorganisms had chewed the pipe to holes as if it was corroded. The young man couldn't help but appreciate his new ability. Unfortunately, using it required incredible physical effort. Suddenly, the guy saw some strange molecule with a virus in it out of the corner of his eye. He was pretty sure he hadn't seen it before. The new molecule quickly soared upwards. Chen Haoshan didn't even have time to examine it more closely. In the same second, the virus swooped down lightning fast on the tin can that had been thrown yesterday and crumpled it in a single blow. The young man couldn't help but laugh. This new ability was a joy to behold. It would be easier for him to survive. He immediately realized that he had not only survived the crisis situation yesterday, but had become stronger. Suddenly the boy felt himself begin to choke. It was getting harder and harder to stay on his feet. Chen Haoqian realized that he had expended too much energy, and he should get a good night's sleep to recover his strength. The young man didn't even make it to the bed. Controlling the viruses required too much strength, and he simply collapsed to the floor. Meanwhile, Cloud Fuyang Corporation was starting a normal day. None of the employees had any idea of their colleagues' nighttime adventures. As soon as Lin Yumu crossed the threshold of the office, the two female employees respectfully bowed to their boss and said hello. The girl didn't even dignify them with her gaze. She had once been honored with the title of Ice Goddess for her attitude. Walking into the CEO's office, Lin Yumu slammed the door angrily. Yesterday's events irritated her. Today the girl was not saved even by the soft executive chair. Her buttocks were very sore after yesterday. The principal remembered everything that had brought her to this point, her face flushed with shame and her tears of helplessness. She promised herself that she would take revenge on the insolent man. Suddenly, Lin Yumu remembered that the guy had called himself the new janitor yesterday. It killed her even more. She was bullied by an employee who has no status in the company at all. The girl blushed and held her head. She had to calm down before Yao Yao came. The deputy would solve all the issues. Chu Yao Yao appeared on the doorstep of the office at exactly the appointed time, loudly clacking her tall stilettos on the marble tiles. She was quickly heading toward the CEO's office in a luxurious light brown leather jacket. The assistant immediately stood up and reported to Vice President Chu that President Lin was already waiting for her in his office. The girl nonchalantly waved away the employee's hand, which was wearing a massive gold bracelet on her wrist, and said she knew it herself. Walking down the corridor, Chu Yao Yao tried to imagine what could have thrown Ling Yuma off balance. Her voice on the phone sounded very strange. The girl opened the door and immediately from the threshold asked what was wrong and why she had to be summoned early. The director was glad that her deputy had already come to the office and asked to sit down. "You can't explain everything in a minute." Chu Yao Yao threw off her shoes and laid down on the sofa. She said resentfully that she had almost sprained her ankle and now had to go to the spa. Lin Yumu asked the girl to evaluate her actions more carefully. She might be seen by some man right now. The vice president remarked in surprise that no one could come in here without special permission. Nothing to worry about. She playfully ran her tongue over her lips and smiled. Chu Yao Yao said that she would have fun with him then. Touching her nose, the deputy admitted she was just kidding. It didn't matter now. The girl squinted her eyes and wondered what had happened out of the blue that she had been called into the office. Unfortunately, the director couldn't give the real reason. Closing her eyes, she asked if the deputy had brought the necessary documents. Chu Yao Yao handed over a brown bag. The director explained that she wanted to make inquiries about a very suspicious type. The girl asked with a smile what he had done and suggested that the guy had no life now that he was on the hook for the principal. Quickly flipping through the dossiers on her employees, Lin Yumu stopped at one questionnaire in detail and froze with horror. From the picture, the same brash type from yesterday was looking at her. She should make him suffer for the insult he had inflicted. Tossing the questionnaire on the table, the CEO shouted that this was the same person she had just talked about. Lin Yumu's quick rise from the chair caused her lower back to ache again. That guy did a good job yesterday. Chu Yao Yao wondered in surprise at what was really going on and why her principal had suddenly turned pale. The girl handed over Chen Haoshin's questionnaire and demanded to make him suffer. The vice president said confusedly that it would be easier to just fire him. Lin Yumu shouted that this was not enough. She needs this person to go through all the circles of hell and regret existing. Chu Yao Yao worriedly touched her forehead for a fever and asked what was the reason for her intense anger. The girl replied that yesterday he had offended her a lot. She is already in a bad mood, so she wants to vent her anger on the guy. To the vice president, everything was now clear. She reluctantly agreed to annoy the young man as long as her director felt good about herself. Already at the door, Chu Yao Yao promised that she would do everything. Lin Yumu said that there was no need to worry about work. That guy was more important. The girl winked slyly at the leader and stated that she would agree to repay her with her body if she were a man. After the office doors slammed shut behind the vice president, Lin Yumu continued to sit pensively at her desk. She looked hatefully at the profile of that guy who was of no use and worked as a pathetic janitor. It was already beginning to be daytime. The sun's rays, filtering through the closed blinds, illuminated the plants and the director at the table. She grabbed a pen and poked at the form. The girl screamed that she wouldn't let him go until he started spitting blood. As she continued to tear his picture with a broken pen, The principal promised that she would keep a close eye on him. The young man didn't care at this point. He slept on the floor of his room again, slumped over with fatigue and turned away from the sunlight. Chung Haochin slept for a very long time. When he opened his eyes, the sun had been shining outside for a long time. Looking at his phone, the young man realized with horror that he had overslept for 3 whole days, and he could be well fined for that. The boy quickly got up from the floor and got dressed. He threw on a windbreaker, still reproaching himself for sleeping so much. Chen Haoshin ran out of the house. He wanted to get to his place of work as quickly as possible. Now was not the time to lose his place. Running down the deserted alley, the young man told himself that he wasn't strong enough yet. He couldn't afford to be out of work. As luck would have it, he met a familiar street vendor on the way. His food smelled amazing, and it was impossible to pass by. Chen Haochin was so hungry that he asked for 2 servings of the treat at once. The vendor gladly fulfilled the order. He worriedly asked the boy why he did not go to work. His sister-in-law told him about it. The young man replied that he was a little sick. The man handed over the order and offered to come to his place for dinner for a couple drinks. Relatives had brought wine. The office building occupied by the Fuyang Cloud Corporation was bustling with activity. No one seemed to notice the absence of the boy. Only the administration was puzzled by his absence. Vice President Chu Yaoyao had already prepared everything for the show, but the young man did not show up. The girl looked unhappily at the phone. She was expecting a very important call every minute, but the phone was silent. Finally, a phone call rang. The Human Resources Department announced Chen Haoshin's arrival. Chu Yaoyao reminded him how to behave. The office door opened. Lin Yumu said that she already knew that the guy had deigned to come to work. The vice president noticed that she had arrived just in time and showed the live feed on her tablet. The young man was just making excuses to his boss. He tried to politely explain the reason for not showing up for work, but the head of Lei's department didn't want to listen to him. He slammed his fist on the table angrily and said it was too much. Chen Haochin embarrassedly said that he was absent due to family reasons. He did not intend to skip work. The man wailed that the company could fire him even for 2 days of absenteeism. The young man replied that he was a small link and asked to be forgiven. When he saw that the head of the department was not affected, the guy squinted slyly and reminded him that last month someone didn't show up for work for a week. The head of the department was frightened. He realized that Chen Haoshin wanted to drag him down with him, and he demanded that he stop immediately. He gestured desperately that there was a camera behind him and they could be being watched right now. The young man pretended not to understand. He asked why the boss had turned so pale. It was just the 2 of them in the office. The boy stretched casually. Suddenly he saw something else suspicious out of the corner of his eye and he became alert. Another of the CCTV cameras was mounted directly under the desk of the head of the department and filmed the young man in close-up. Oh, and there was something that looked like a camera eye near the socket. Chen Haoshin realized that he was clearly being trapped. He loudly told the department head that he had spoken ill of their vice president, and many millions would be happy to desecrate her grave. Supervisor Lei almost cried and angrily shook his fists. He realized that the boy had figured it out and wanted to take revenge on him. The 2 girls in the vice president's office couldn't find a place to be angry. They, too, realized that the guy had taught them a lesson. Chu Yaoyao shouted that this insolent person even dared to insult her. Lin Yumu angrily exclaimed that she would find a way to deal with him. Department head. Lei lost his temper and shouted that from now on, Chen Haoshin would be in charge of all the bathrooms of the 27 floors. The young man was glad he hadn't been fired. The boy was willing to do the dirtiest job. He knew he could handle it. Chen Haochin asked to borrow some money. The man shouted that work is all about making money. The young man went out and slammed the door, saying lastly that in that case he would start his duties right away. Watching the camera, Chu Yaoyao thoughtfully said that it would be better to transfer him to the administrative department and throw him into a routine. Lin Yumu said that in that case, all her female coworkers would end their lives. This high school graduate is good for nothing but mopping floors. If she knew the truth, she would be horrified. In fact, Chen Haoshin had bought a high school diploma for $200. Watching their ward working vigorously, the vice president suggested putting the lad as a security guard. The principal shouted that this despicable type didn't deserve such a thing. After seeing him just once, she hasn't been able to eat for 3 days. Chu Yaoyao wondered why she was in such a bad mood and who dared to upset her today. The girl immediately turned toward the exit and nervously wailed that it was all because of him. Only that janitor was ruining her life. She angrily jabbed her index finger in the direction of her subordinate and declared that the vice president should teach the boor a great lesson. Chu Yaoyao tiredly said that she would do everything. The general manager's whining was getting to her, and she didn't see a problem with the janitor. Chen Haoshin finished all the work after a few hours and happily straightened his back. It was possible to go home. Suddenly he remembered that he had promised Sunu that he would stop by for dinner tonight. He couldn't go empty-handed. He would have to visit his superiors. The young man timidly knocked on the door of Lei's department head. The man was still at work and sitting at his desk. Seeing the guy on the doorstep, the department head realized that Chen Haoshin had done his job and said goodbye to him in a friendly manner. The young man smiled and asked to borrow some money for groceries. The man was angry. He had never seen such shameless people before. Meanwhile, a girl in a green dress was walking through the unfavorable Dongcheng district in the late afternoon. People had been disappearing here for a long time. An unshaven man in a jacket with a dragon embroidered on it lurked around the corner. He was one of the nighttime criminals. Meanwhile, Ronrong hurriedly continued on her way, and out of the corner of her eye she saw a black shadow following her. The beautiful woman in the green dress became wary. She was well aware of all these stories and realized that one of them was following her. There was no more time for doubts. The girl forgot her pride and rushed away. She didn't know that a young man with a bag of apples was behind her. Chen Haoshin couldn't believe that this pretty stranger had mistaken him for a criminal. He angrily shouted that the girl was mistaken. The young man knew very well that they were not alone here. There could be bad guys lurking in any dark corner. The beauty had better be warned. He shouted after Ronrong and called out to her. When she heard the boy's voice, she stopped running and stopped in confusion. Chen Haoshin tried to explain himself, but he frightened his interlocutor even more. She rushed away from him, calling him a pervert. The young man remained standing with his hand outstretched. Ronrong had insulted him to the core without even understanding the situation. As she ran away, she thought it was Huang Mao's man again. He was always chasing her, and would not let her pass. Suddenly, a young man appeared in front of her. He seemed to be waiting for her and stepped out of the shadows, blocking her way. A young man wearing a t-shirt had a gold chain around his neck. He said he was glad they had met by chance and asked where Ronrong was in such a hurry. He said it was his birthday today, so he was inviting her home. The girl irritably asked him to stop clinging. She had a boyfriend. Huang Mao walked closer to the girl and gently took her chin. He assumed that Ronrong was in a hurry to go on a date. The man squinted his eye and offered a deal. They would spend a few nights and then she would go wherever she wanted. The girl screamed that she was going to call the police. Huang Mao angrily said that in that case her whole family would suffer. He recalled that many people had disappeared on this very street. The young man was so engrossed in the threats that he paid no attention to the red big apple that was flying at him with a whistling sound. The bully was hit right in the neck by the projectile. Huang Mao let go of the prisoner, coughing up blood because of the pain. His partner immediately rushed towards the boss, worried for his health. Ronrong turned back with fear. She knew who had done it. The girl wasn't wrong. It really was that weird pervert. He sacrificed one apple and threw it at the guy. Chen Haoshin softly told the bully that he was sorry. He had bought the apple as a gift, and so he asked for it back. The subordinate helped Huang Mao to his feet and asked how he was feeling. Ronrong looked at the young man in white sneakers in surprise. Holding onto his bruised spot, the ringleader gritted angrily through his teeth that it wasn't very proper to attack from the back. Chen Haotian admitted that he had little interest in the issue of justice. He came here to make a profit. Ronrong realized with horror that this was the same type who had been following her. From the looks of it, he was no better than the bandits. Huang Mao was also of the same opinion. He smiled lustfully and happily said that the guy was driven by the same motives as himself. The ringleader generously agreed to give the girl back after he'd had his fun with her and asked for help getting her into the car. Chen Haochin frowned and shouted at the ringleader, wondering what he was going to do with the beautiful Rongrong. Huang Mao and his partner couldn't understand what was going on. This guy was behaving very strangely, for he admitted that he was a robber like them. The young man stepped forward and proudly told Rongrong that he was the general manager of the Red Scarf organization and was coming to help in times of need. Given the current circumstances, he offers to solve the issue for only 1,000 yuan with a guarantee of results. The girl was surprised to hear that for 2,000 the guy would mutilate the ugly aliens, and for 3,000 he would deliver them to the police. This was beginning to make Huang Mao nervous. He couldn't believe that he and his partner had been called ugly aliens by some snooty guy. Chen Haotian added that getting rid of the pursuers for good would help the 5,000 yuan premium package. The young man bowed and told Rongrong that his private organization did not accept counteroffers. She should choose a favor. The leader finally came to his senses and lunged at the offender with a cleaver. The guy would pay with his life for insulting his handsome face. Seeing that Huang Mao's partner, Huang Mao, was approaching her, the girl hurriedly shouted out that she was choosing a 5,000 elite package. Chen Haotian smiled and winked at the customer. He cheerfully said that she wouldn't regret spending the money. When the young man turned to his opponent, the deadly blade glinted in his face. Still, the ringleader was not fast enough. The guy lightning struck his opponent. Due to the intense pain, Huang Mao released his weapon. The knife flew upwards by inertia, spinning rapidly in the air. The ringleader's partner was very surprised to see his boss fly past him and hit the wall, knocking some plaster off. Chen Haoshan continued to hold the bag of apples in his hand and frowned at his opponent rising from his knees. Huang Mao spat and realized that he had lost a couple of teeth after the blow. Their shards were in the palm of his hand. The ringleader shouted angrily that now the guy was definitely finished. No one in the neighborhood had ever subjected him to such humiliation. The young man kicked the man in the face in surprise and declared that today was his first time in such a case. The partner rushed fearfully toward his boss. He realized that the situation was out of control. The girl was wringing her hands in worry. Mao's associate shouted that Rongrong was the only one to blame for all this and lunged at the girl with a knife, vowing to kill her. Suddenly something made him stop on the spot. The young man didn't immediately realize that the guy had taken his neck in a stranglehold. It was getting harder and harder for him to resist. He was desperately short of air. The knife fell from his weakened hand. The bandit lost consciousness and collapsed face down on the asphalt with a thud, never to get up again. The young man was still faint. Rongrong had been watching her savior's actions in amazement the whole time. She had never seen such strong men before. Chen Haoshan leisurely walked over to Huang Mao and kicked him in the back so hard that the poor guy howled in hellish pain. The young man smilingly reported to the astonished Rongrong that his mission to eliminate the enemy had been successfully completed. He started strangling the thugs at the same time and offered to order a diamond package to get rid of the guys for good. Squinting his eyes, the guy said ingratiatingly that he could dispose of them in such a way that no police would find a trace. Rongrong was frightened. It looked like he could really do that. The girl exclaimed that she didn't need it at all. She began to sincerely thank and bless the stranger. The young man declared that he did not need a blessing. Rongrong herself needs retribution, and he needs money. The girl admitted that she had no money and held out 300 yuan. Chen Haotian couldn't believe that she was so poor. Rongrong explained that she had recently started working and promised to pay everything back later. The young man happily said he would accept an installment plan and quickly told the girl the interest rate, payment monthly. The guy added that dishonest customers are hounded by their organization for the rest of their lives and kicked Huang Mao once more to confirm the seriousness of his intentions. The ringleader could barely breathe and moaned in pain. Through his tears, he asked Chen Haoshan how he could even do such a bad thing to him. Sun Rongrong introduced herself and said she worked in the surgical department. She promised to pay the balance without fail. The young man smiled and raised his thumb up. He said he saw the girl's honest intentions and would not charge for this month. Rongrong bowed politely to her savior and said that she would go home in that case. Haoshan waved goodbye to her. To the girl's surprise, the strange guy continued to follow her. She thought it was a coincidence and he would turn off soon, but he continued to follow her, keeping some distance behind her. In this way, they walked down the whole alley together. Sung Rongrong turned to a nearby street, but her savior kept up with her and followed her relentlessly. This made her a little uneasy. The strange guy took her almost all the way home and wasn't even going to turn around. He just followed her. Even when the beauty walked into the entryway of his house, he followed her silently, as if he were trying to find out her address. The girl turned frightened and said she would not refuse the debt. He already knew where she worked, so he didn't need to know the address. Chen Haotian replied that he believes in the girl's honesty. She is wrong. He doesn't need to know where she lives at all. The young man stated to a surprised Rongrong that he had actually come to visit a friend who lives in the house. The girl knew that there were only a few apartments in their building. She looked at the boy incredulously and remembered that they had a guest coming today. Song Rongrong assumed that his name was Chen Haotian. The young man asked in surprise how she knew her name. He began to realize something and asked if the girl's father sold donuts on the street. Rongrong felt very embarrassed. She had no idea that she had met Uncle Chen. The young man turned away, barely restraining himself. He couldn't believe that Sun had a daughter so beautiful that he couldn't take his eyes off her. The guy smiled and said they had a small age difference, not necessarily calling him uncle. Rongrong replied that etiquette required it. Suddenly, a saving thought came into the girl's head. She smiled embarrassedly and asked if she could not return the money to her uncle. Chen Haoshan frowned and waved his hands. The contract has already been made, so it can't be broken or cancelled. Song Rongrong climbed down a few steps closer to the guy and stared intently into his eyes. She asked for a small discount. The young man reluctantly waived the interest and said that the principal payment was still valid. The girl thanked the guy embarrassedly. He didn't expect the girl to be so cunning. Suddenly, someone called out to them both from behind. The boy and girl turned in surprise at the woman's voice, which was well known to both of them. Rongrong happily said hello to her mother. She had both hands full of grocery bags. The woman asked if the young man knew Rongrong. Chen Haotian helped her carry the groceries to her apartment, and in a few minutes, the men were already sitting at the table. Sun offered some drinks to warm up before the meal and poured the alcohol into shots. He promised that dinner would be soon. The young man stated that there was no need to hurry at all. They could enjoy the conversation while waiting for the food. Meanwhile, Mrs. Zhang in the kitchen kept prying her daughter if they really met by chance and didn't know each other before. The woman said sadly that Chen Haoshin was a great guy, but very lazy. The girl was afraid that they might be overheard. The young man actually heard every word through the ajar door. He was almost crying with grief, his hand with the stack trembling. Meanwhile, in the dark alleys of Dongcheng, the bandits finally came to their senses. Huang Mao was angry. This could not be left like this. He and his partner fell to their knees in front of Boss Tao in the presence of the rest of the gang. They begged for revenge against that man. The man in the chair slowly lit his cigarette and asked through gritted teeth the name of the guy who dared to attack them. The beaten Huang Mao admitted that the fighter had called himself Red Scarf. The group members looked at each other in surprise. Tao smirked. A tough warrior wouldn't call himself that. He commanded the humiliated fighters to take care of the girl first. The table was filled with different dishes. There was fish, salad, and pickled eels. Chung really liked Sister Zhang's food and praised her. The dinner was very tasty. She told him that he could eat as much as he wanted, and Chen ate the seafood rice with gusto. Unexpectedly, Sister Zhang asked if Chen had offended anyone in the company. Surprised, Chen replied that he had not. But she looked at her brother incredulously and asked him if he was sure. With sadness, Chen said that he had a big fight with the senior manager because he hadn't been to work for 2 days. But he was on good terms with the rest of the staff. Jan noted the senior manager's anger with surprise and added that security cameras were constantly watching Chen. Chen Haoshin hesitated and questioned whether this could be true. He had not noticed such a thing. Then he not only languished but also began to think. Chen knew that security work was never taken seriously by the management. But perhaps things had changed and an investigation would begin. Seeing that Chen became sad, Sun tried to comfort him. After all, he was still so young and would easily find a job if he lost this one. Sun wanted to support Chen and give him hope. But Chen exclaimed that he didn't want another job. He liked it, and was friendly with everyone without exception. Brother Sun laughingly praised Chen's tolerance. For some reason, he was happy that his brother had no ambition. He offered to toast them, and the sounds of family fun rang out joyfully in the evening city. Chen thanked for the dinner and got ready to go home, as it was quite late. Sun volunteered to walk him home. Sun ran down the stairs after him, asking him not to tell his parents about what had happened today. The young man looked away cheerfully, saying he wouldn't say anything. In addition, recommending that he go home so he wouldn't have to rescue her again. Sun stood as if mesmerized and stared after Chung, who was leaving. But then her mother came out of the door and asked Sun if she had met him before. Because you can't date a guy like that. Sun was afraid that Chen might hear. However, it was in vain and too late. Chen had heard everything and walked away down the dark street. Sun realized this and a tear rolled down from her eye. She didn't want to hurt Uncle Chang. She liked him a lot. And his mother kept raging angrily, wondering what kind of family he was from, what kind of job he had, and when he was coming to their house. Chen's house seemed lonely and cold. People rarely came here, and Chen had never had any animals. Once inside, he opened the refrigerator and took a long look at its contents, even though it was nearly empty. Chen pulled out a syringe and thought, did he need more of this, or could it be enough? So he stood and held it, not knowing whether to put it back or not, examining it and holding it up to the light. Chen, still raised to go to bed and tomorrow find out who might be following him. The next day, they had already arrived at the Fuyang Cloud Corporation. Yao Yao was waiting for him in the office, eager for revenge. She was in full force, beautiful and elegant. She called for Vice President Chu and informed her that the janitor is here, and everyone needs to take their seats. The unsuspecting Chen walked to work, slowly and unhurriedly, because he was never late. And in my mind, I was thinking that today might be the day of retribution, though things could change. A man with a baton appeared behind Chen. He was very tall and of large build. The baton flew at the young man. Chen didn't even turn around. He only heard it whistle as it flew past his ear, but the hand came up on its own, made a slight U-turn, waited for the baton to fly. Chen grabbed the baton, waved it around 2 or 3 times. Then he swung it and threw it. It flew strangely at the man who threw it at Chen. Meanwhile, Yao Yao was preparing the next group. Na was angry and impatient. The group with the devious plan was getting closer and closer. No one had any idea what Yao Yao was up to. A sewage tanker flew at Chen. Yao Yao cheered. This should finish Chen off. She'll crash into him and he'll end up in the shit in front of everyone. The tanker was moving with the speed of the wind, coming closer and closer. It was already out of control. But incomprehensibly, she flew past. Chen only glanced after her. A wheelbarrow crashed nearby. It overturned. All the contents scattered too. Yao Yao was furious. How could this happen? After all, she had thought of everything. Chen nonchalantly went to work and entered the vice premier's office. He bowed politely and offered to sit down in the chair with a menacing look, but Chen remained standing. Yao Yao was planning something sneaky with that chair. She prepared everything in advance. The chair should have broken as soon as Chen sat in it. Chen sat up, but the chair was still intact, and he sat in it quietly. Yao Yao was indignant. She didn't understand why her cunning didn't work. She was getting more and more pissed off by this Chen. The vice president also lost his temper, swear words coming out of his mouth. He was cursing and pointing at the door for some reason. And Chen pondered how he could be watched. He looked around, trying to find the security cameras. At the same time, this was the second time the vice president had sent Chen to clean the bathrooms on all floors. Chen Haoshin walked out of his office, not failing to slam the door. The vice president walked slowly around his office. He walked over to the chair, not understanding how Chen could not have fallen. Examined it from all sides, looked under it. He sat down on a chair and thought about it. He sat down on a hook that was sticking out of the seat. Apparently it was very large because Chu yelled for all he was worth. Yao Yao sat in her office and wondered why Chen hadn't fallen. It had never occurred to her that her plan might not work. Someone knocked insistently on the door. It was Lin Yumu. She was beautifully dressed and generally looked immaculate. She asked her sister how it had gone. She was curious to know every little detail. Yao Yao told her that things aren't going as smoothly as she'd like, but she has another trick she's going to do to Chen. Yao Yao told her sister something in confidence. They both laughed and then hugged each other. The sisters agreed that what Yao Yao came up with wasn't too much at all. Lin Yumu even said that her sister was too kind, but Yao Yao countered that she would take care of everything herself. Lin reminded her that she had a meeting this afternoon and her sister was staying in charge. Yao Yao assured her that everything would be at its best and not to worry. The toilets and sanitary facilities were empty. It was strange. There was no one anywhere, not a single person. Chen cleaned as thoroughly as ever. He was always thinking about something while working, and it didn't tire him out. He reflected on the fact that he was being watched even while cleaning. It annoyed him. Then he thought about the fact that maybe this was the girl he'd met, but he pushed the thought away. Chen decided to try to determine where the person who was following him might be. He headed for the administrative office on the 8th floor. He walked cautiously and met no one. Just as he thought, he found a camera there. He looked at it carefully, twirled it in his hands. Chen pondered as he checked the entire department but never saw who exactly was doing the surveillance. Chen was in indecision and doubt. He kept wondering who needed him. And then he found a suspicious girl doing something unexplainable. It was the general manager. She ordered Chung to go up to the president's office on the 8th floor. She said the bathroom was very dirty and needed to be cleaned immediately. Chen told her that he was heading there immediately. In fact, he did. He went to the 8th floor. And he thought to himself that since she wanted to play so badly, he would give her that pleasure. The room Chen approached was listed as number 28F. He stood up and looked around. There was no one around, not a soul, and there was not a sound to be heard. A huge puddle of ink was spilled on the floor, which was quite difficult to clean up. Chen was considering how to get to work, but then he saw Yao Yao. She stood and looked at him mockingly. She said she was sorry he had to come here because of him, that she was here today instead of Sister Lu, and repeated that she was sorry. At this time, in front of a monitor on another floor, a young girl was watching everything in the cell. The thought flashed through her mind that Miss Chu had found a new target, and also that it was time to stop peeping at work, or else she would get into trouble. Chen was surprised at how such a thing could even happen. After all, it couldn't have come out of nowhere. Yao Yao insisted that it was an accident. However, Chen didn't believe it. It was like someone had made a mess on purpose. Yao Yao, on the other hand, kept babbling that she would be punished a lot if the boss was at work today. Chen, however, understood everything and thought about the fact that many people had tried to kill him, to trick him, but none of them had succeeded. Chen picked up the mop and promised to clean up soon. Yao Yao was even upset that the young man wasn't paying attention to her. She thought she'd gotten older because there hadn't been a man who hadn't liked her before. When Chung cleaned up, she thanked him and gave herself her word that she would do her best to please him. Chen, on the other hand, took it differently. He saw her as a girl who wanted to hurt him and was happy about it. Yao Yao managed to grab Chen's name tag that was hanging around his neck and read it carefully. She was a little surprised that her brother's name was Chen Haoshin. She even exclaimed that it was a coincidence because she had a younger brother with the same name. She continued to talk about her brother, saying that he wasn't tall, looking into Chen's eyes and purposely undoing a button. However, Chen noticed her doing so and asked her to button it up. She, on the other hand, began to button her shirt in feigned embarrassment, accusing Chen of looking in the wrong place. Chen immediately realized that she was playing with him, but Yao Yao was too young and inexperienced to compete with him. Yao Yao was furious at Chen's flirting, or rather his rejection. Instead of kind words, her thoughts were filled with curses and revenge. 10 minutes later, the room was all cleaned up, and Yao Yao pretentiously complimented Chen on the cleanliness and neatness. When he was about to leave, she offered tea with a sweet smile, as she supposedly felt guilty about the mess. The floor was scrubbed and polished to a high shine, and Chen was about to leave without reacting to her words. But in her mind, Yao Yao hoped that Chen would drink the tea that had the poisonous drug in it. Chen, on the other hand, had guessed it, although he pretended to be polite. Chen didn't want to drink, which was what Yao Yao said. He immediately suspected that there was something wrong with the tea. Yao Yao thought tirelessly that if Chen didn't drink the tea, all the work she had done would go to waste. Yao Yao began to conjecture that she had never made tea for anyone before, and that he should definitely drink it and not be so harmful. Chen agreed. He took a sip and immediately realized it was a laxative. Chen grinned to himself, since even the virus couldn't do anything to him. What to say about laxatives? Chen took the glass and drank the tea. He also savored it and praised the taste. He finished the whole thing. There was no limit to Yao Yao's joy, while Chen thanked once more and politely said that the tea was delicious. Chen's thoughts raced ahead of him. He was angry and thinking about what to do to Yao Yao, and he decided to do to her what she did to him, to make her feel what real pain in her stomach feels like. He turned around and turned to Yao Yao as if remembering something. She said he scared her. Chen replied that he would like to hear Yao Yao's opinion on a matter, which alerted her. He leaned over to her and said in an icy voice that a girl on the 8th floor had a grudge against him. Yao Yao was startled in bewilderment. But Chen continued. He saw surveillance cameras everywhere, following him relentlessly. Chen started to say that he noticed that someone was always watching him, and that could only be done from the 8th floor. Yao Yao was discouraged at how quickly he had guessed everything. He continued that he thought he was a small man and didn't deserve that kind of attention. Yao Yao began to flatter that he was really a good person. Chen continued that since no one needed him to be followed, maybe someone liked him. However, he doesn't think he's worthy of a good woman because he doesn't have a decent job or money. Yao Yao was puzzled. And then Chen, out of spite for Yao Yao, started calling the one who might like him names. She's fat, ugly, obnoxious. Yao Yao almost lost her temper. Chen pondered aloud whether he could handle such a woman alone. And he already had a small virus nestled in his hand. Then he asked Yao Yao for help, and shook her hand. Thanking her for listening to him, he put a hand on her shoulder and went back to work. And there was already a virus nestled on her back that immediately began to do its work. Yao Yao, left alone, began to pretend to cry, saying that Chen Haotian was a good man. Other thoughts, however, were weighing on her. She wondered if he would be as confident and calm in 3 hours. Chen walked out of the office building. He knew that the onset of the golden diarrhea virus occurs within 3 hours at the latest. He only wished he could see it. It never occurred to him how he could see it. He got in the car and kept thinking and thinking about how it was going to happen. Imagined everything in detail. Her tears and her agony. And then he was surprised to see Yao Yao, who was on her way from work, even though the time of the workday was not yet over. Chen began to wonder what else she might be up to. What nastiness might be lurking in her head. And Yao Yao suddenly paused and invited Chen to dinner as a token of her gratitude. Chen started to refuse, but he had already opened the car door. Yao Yao let him in with a smile. They drove through the evening streets, wondering where to have dinner. Chen said he only knew bad places. Yao Yao drove faster and faster, pressing down on the gas pedal. They gradually approached the outskirts of the city. She promised they were going to a place in paradise. It's a place where there's lots of fun and good food. The car drove faster and faster along the country road. There were more and more bushes instead of houses. And then Chen noticed that they were driving out of town, to which he asked his companion. She replied that they were going to a farm near Fuyang. They said it was delicious, and she decided to give it a try. Though she had thoughts in her head that she would never eat with Chen. Chen was looking forward to it, at least that's what he said, adding that he hadn't had a delicious lunch in a long time. At the same time, he thought that Yao Yao wanted to take him to a place with no restrooms to make him a laughingstock. He also thought that the medicine would not work on him, but on her. And Yao Yao thought that her hour of triumph would soon come. Well, the finale is coming up. The end of the story. Some will be laughed at and some will be avenged. They drove in silence, each thinking about his own. Although each was thinking about the person sitting next to him. Yao Yao began to doubt that the pills might be out of expiration date because nothing is happening. And then her stomach started to cramp up. So hard. It had never happened to her before. She grimaced in pain, tears dripping from her eyes. Her stomach ached like she'd swallowed coals. It hurt a lot. Yao Yao was twisted in 3 pieces. She couldn't understand what was wrong with her because she hadn't eaten anything for half a day. The car stopped abruptly. There was no one around. Chen looked at her anxiously. Yao Yao started moaning in pain, then jumped out of the car and rushed into the woods, grabbing some tissues. She was in such a hurry that she jumped over a roadside fence, almost falling. But she got up and ran further into the woods. Chen shouted afterward, wondering if they'd made it to the restaurant. But she wasn't in the mood for jokes. She turned around angrily and walked away with a quick step. Then Chen saw her faltering. Chen was still joking about her having a crazy fetish with foraying into the woods and running obstacle courses. She didn't care about restaurants. She shouted for Chen to wait for her in the car and disappeared into the thick of the forest. but Chen still shouted back that the thicket was not safe. In response, he heard a shout for him not to follow her. Chen joked about the paper taken with him, and then said that Yao Yao could have just said she needed the restroom, hearing back from the angry girl that he was an idiot. Yao Yao decided to walk a little further. She kept feeling like she could be seen from all sides. Chen shouted to her that there might be snakes there and that if there was any danger, she should definitely call him. She was very frightened, but Chen shouted that he was joking, which caused the girl's new resentment. But suddenly she felt very sick. Her eyes darkened, and she was ready to faint. She was out of breath. She began to choke, and the coughing began to choke her. She felt like she was about to pass out. The girl could not understand what was happening to her. She was scared. She realized that now she needed help. The car was still waiting on the side of the road. No one was driving by. They had traveled far, and Chen began to worry about why she was gone for so long. Perhaps something had happened. He also wondered if a small diarrhea virus could kill a person. He felt uneasy. What if he had made some irreparable mistake? Then he saw a girl who was all pale, barely holding onto branches, barely walking to the car. She asked that he call an ambulance and as soon as possible. She could barely speak, drops of sweat beading on her forehead. On the way, she threw away the napkin she had been using. The napkin was left lying on a tree branch. The girl clung to Chen, crying, and he felt sorry for her. He didn't know how to help her. But on the other hand, Chen knew she should have been bleeding, and she wasn't. And that puzzled him. What was I supposed to do? Should I call an ambulance or try to figure it out on my own? And can anyone help her at all? Chen put the girl on the ground. He needed to figure things out quickly before she died. He put his hand on her stomach and felt the virus reject his hand. Chen once again thought that she was close to death, and he definitely needed to do something quickly. He thought that since he had failed to restore Yao Yao, perhaps he could eliminate the virus itself. And that's when he came up with the only true solution: eliminate the virus with another virus. There is no other way. And Chen began to recall everything he knows about viruses while keeping his hands on Yao Yao's body. He doubted it would work and tried to reconstruct the virus down to the smallest detail. He succeeded. He visualized what he looked like. Chen also remembered that with visualization he could magnify microscopic things. And I decided that I had to enlarge it first and then destroy it. And then it would work. He put his hand on the girl's stomach, trying to feel what was inside her belly. Everything swirled around and became a blue transparent color. Chen didn't expect such a thing and was surprised himself. A small virus got caught in the clutches of a big one. And now there was a battle between them. And Chen felt the virus leave the body of Yao Yai, who was lying unconscious in front of him. But he didn't leave at all. It circled over Chung, circling in a feverish dance. Not only that, but he was growing and getting big and scary. Everything was unpredictable. What might happen in the next moment, Chen didn't know. Eventually, it took on a form unlike anything else, which was terrifying. Chen hesitated as he looked at this monster, figuring out what to do next. He looked at the virus and thought that one was ugly and dangerous, and that even if she freed it, it still had to be destroyed. Chen didn't want to see this bogeyman around him anymore. He himself was afraid of him, although he realized that he was less afraid of him than others. The virus prepared for the attack, warming up and flying around the guy. He was flying up and away, but Chen was firmly determined to eliminate him. He stood up and prepared himself. He strained his mind, will, and strength. The fight had begun. The viruses were amused, believing that Chen couldn't handle them. They showed their teeth and their deadly tentacles, trying to get close. However, Chen had a magic weapon. It appeared out of nowhere and burned brightly. Brave Chen went into battle with the deadly virus. In one of the virus's attempts to deliver a fatal blow to Chen, Chen swung his fire dagger and severed the virus's hand. The virus wouldn't let up. He knew he could act without some of his body parts. But in one of the fights, Chen dodged and dealt the virus a fatal blow. The virus collapsed and began to vaporize. And Chen thought that he didn't even think that the released virus could cause him so much trouble. He was wounded. He'd have to be more careful from now on. He thought he was trying to help that girl, but he had hurt himself, perhaps irreparably. Tears flowed from Chen's eyes. He felt sorry for himself. He couldn't calm down. He reminisced about his time in the service, how many missions he'd completed. And now, because of a minor virus, he could die. But suddenly the sun came out from behind the clouds. The bright sun shone. The birds sang in the forest. Yao Yao woke up and opened her eyes. Then she quietly asked what had happened to her. She sat down on the grass and looked around. She felt her stomach no longer hurt and looked around for Chen. She rose and walked across the lawn to which Chen had carried her. There was surprise and sadness in her eyes. She didn't remember what exactly had happened to her. On the grass, she saw Chen Haoshin, who wasn't moving and was covered in blood. She went over to him and sat down beside him, stroking his arm. She saw that he had opened his eyes and began to wonder why there was so much blood, why he was here, and was he okay? It seemed to Yao Yao that Chen had saved her while he himself had gotten hurt, though she didn't know how he had done it, but that she definitely knew she had to help him. The girl went back to her car, found her phone, dialed a number, and called an ambulance. And Chen, who was unconscious, muttered to someone that he was a bloody old bastard. Chen Hyochen lost his parents when he was still a child. He was raised by an old man, a bastard, as Chen called him. Chen lived in the wild mountains until he was 8 years old, where he studied ancient texts and medical books. At the age of 12, the old man ordered the dissection of corpses, and Chen was disgusted to do so. When Chen studied anatomy, he decided to go to medical school and become a doctor, but the bastard sent him to a bloody war where he could be killed every second. Then Chen thought he would become a soldier, but a mercenary and choose where to be. But the old man sent Chen on a round-the-world killing spree. Chen was cold-blooded and inexperienced. He became a true assassin, leaving no one the slightest chance. He had amassed a fortune from the spilled blood and was ready to give up the throne of supreme assassin. The old man faked Chen's death and asked to join the unit as a freelance agent. Chung had new documents made and no one had any questions about his identity. The old man was quite good at what he did. One day on a mission, Chen received news that an old man had died and left a box as an inheritance. Chen would only be able to open the box when he became strong. It was very mysterious. Chen tried to open the box. He both hacked it and tried to chop it with an axe, but nothing worked. Then a young man immersed himself in his work to become super strong and super masculine. He went on a mission to Africa, where he contracted the super virus. It became a chance to live a normal life for Chen. He began to appreciate just sweeping the floors. Yao Yao stood outside the hospital to ask the doctor how Chen was. She was really worried about him. The doctor replied that he was fine, no abnormalities, and he could be discharged soon. The girl was very surprised. She felt her life leaving her at that moment. She thought of Cheng. Only a man with incredible powers could have saved her at that moment, pulled her out of that world. Chen was lying in a hospital room unconscious. There was silence and cleanliness all around. He dreamed of different worlds and viruses, some bright and colorful, or unknown black ones. Chen opened his eyes, looked around the ward. Nothing remarkable caught his eye. He stood up and wondered. What had happened to him? He couldn't remember anything. A strange thought crossed his mind that his meridians had cleared, but the thought seemed ridiculous. Chen thought he had crossed a boundary, having only been to the other world, that he hadn't been able to break for years. The ward neighbor looked at Chen in surprise and wondered what was wrong with this guy. And Chen himself realized that by using his inner strength to roughly calculate, he had become 3 times stronger. Now he'll definitely be able to open the box the old freak left him. There was a clatter of heels in the hallway. The door opened, and Yao Yao appeared on the threshold. In her hands, she held a basket of fruit. She smiled and asked how Chen was feeling. Chen replied that he was already fine, and so was she, as he could see. They smiled at each other. Yao Yao was confused. She realized that Chen had saved her, which she asked directly. Did she owe her life to him? She immediately said thank you. Chen smiled slyly and replied that he was expecting a little more gratitude than thanks. The neighbor left the room out of politeness. However, Yao Yao was confused and asked what exactly Chen meant. Chen lowered his head and explained that he had been in a coma for a few days, and today, if he didn't show up for work, he could be fired. Yao Yao assured Chen that she would help take his vacation, and their company is very humane to their employees. Chen muttered quietly that he was sweeping the streets and he was not rich. He lowered his head and waited for a reply. Yao Yao assured him that she had already paid his medical bills. He could lie here and recuperate for as long as he needed, and also that she would fully reimburse him for his salary. Chen had been worried for half a day because of this, but he only hummed in response and thought again. But then he still asked the girl how much his help had cost that day. Chen continued to assure the girl that if he had not saved her that day with his ancestral knowledge, she might have died, and he almost lost his life because of her. Yao Yao was indignant after Cheng's statement that he wouldn't ask for much money. She thought the guy was too confident. Chen said he needed so much and didn't say how much, making Yao Yao nervous. They began to haggle. Yao Yao offered 1,000, and Chen ridiculed her. Then she offered 10,000. Chen asked in response, "Is her life really worth so little? Only 10,000 for her priceless life." The girl became furious. She even changed to shouting and asked if Chen really wanted 100,000. And Chen's reply only smiled, and replied that she was from the president's office after all, and he thought that such an amount was a drop in the bucket for her. Yao Yao started yelling that it wasn't that big of an amount for her, but before he could get it, they had one more issue to resolve. And she said she was a very decent and innocent girl and she was in a coma that day. And he's a man, and she doesn't know what he did to her. Chen protested, saying that he was not that kind of person. Yao Yao insisted that she didn't know what he could have done. It was overheard by a neighbor who came back into the room. Yao Yao added that she also saved Chen's life, and he wasn't forced to save her that way. It was enough to bring her to the hospital. Yao Yao cried and said that she didn't ask him to take responsibility. Chen replied that she should forget everything, and he didn't need the money. Then Yao Yao said out loud that everything was forgotten and thought to herself that this bastard would never defeat her. Chen quickly packed up. He decided to go home. He was tired of lying in bed with nothing to do. On top of that, he wanted to take the deposit for the room for himself. He could use it now. The hospital administration returned his deposit of 20,000 to him. Chen gladly took them and began to count the money. He reasoned that this money would be enough for a while. Before leaving the hospital, Chen asked what the girl's name was after all. They still hadn't met, and she said her name was Yao Yao. Chen said goodbye, saying that they would see each other at the office. After all, they work in the same company. In parting, Yao Yao said that she was going to invite Chen to dinner, but he could forget about it now. And to Chen, coming out of the hospital, it seemed that he had become sturdier, stronger, and healthier. Chen returned to the eastern slum city. There in his room, he felt lonely but safe. He searched frantically, repeating where it was. Where was it? This box he kept thinking about. Chen kept thinking and remembering about the box the bastard had once left behind. Chen remembered using it as a table stand, looked under the table and saw it there. He pulled it out from under the table, wondering what might be in there. Shook it. Chen put the box on the table, looked at it a little, thought a little, and then opened it. In it was a book with ancient inscriptions. Chen was confused. He didn't expect that there would be no money, no treasure, but a simple book. He threw the box against the wall with fury. He was furious and ready to smash everything in his path. But in time, Chen calmed down. The guy thought that even in death, the old bastard was able to mess with Cheng. Chen was very angry with the old bastard. He knew the box would be a trick. He thought so as he looked into the virus fridge. He took one can and began to drink greedily, thinking that he believed he was happy for nothing. Someone was watching Chen. Suddenly, strange words came to Chen's ears that almost made him choke. Someone said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and called him a little bastard. Chen looked around and saw that it was the old bastard. He stood in front of him and gritted his teeth. This man with round glasses stood there and said that by the time Chen sees this footage, he will most likely be gone. But he doesn't care. He guesses that Chen is cursing him right now. He also said he didn't sneeze at the hate, and Chen could continue to hate or listen. Chen was puzzled and indignant. He thought that the cursed old man was once again going to play some kind of game with him. However, the old man continued. He said that Chen's strength had reached the meridian refining point, which was both good and bad, and added that the latter should know some things since he was his favorite disciple. And he began his story about how he didn't actually die a natural death, because his time had come. He died from a serious injury in a martial arts competition. Chen was stunned. This person had actually been the head of the Tianjin Palace ancient sect for many, many years. He said that his sect had a long-standing conflict with the other Flying Feather sect. Every 30 years, the two sides competed for the right of supremacy in the sect competition. But the Flying Feather clan has the advantage this year and will most likely win. There are only 3 disciples in the 63rd generation of Tianjin Palace. Here, the old man turned around, looked at the young man and pointed at him with his hand, saying that in the 64th generation, Chen was the only member of the Tianjin Palace. Chen was stunned and speechless. He could not believe and accept that it was him. The old man said that the ancient book in the box was the masterpiece of his school, subduing the 9 heavens and stars. And he, Chen, must practice well to restore the sect to its former glory. Chen objected that it was a trek to certain death again, but the old man said he had done everything to prevent it. Then the old man said something that made my hair stand on end. He had poisoned Chen, and now he had to study the book to survive. Otherwise, he won't live more than 10 years. Chen was angry. He wanted to kill the old man. He pounced on him, but an unknown force prevented him from approaching the old man. Then he asked if he had understood correctly that the book was called Submission of the 9 Heavens and Stars. The old man replied that yes, and if Chen trains hard, he will reach the 2nd level. The power to resist poison will rise, and he can also reach a new realm. He is a receiver. The streetlights shone with white light, and Chen thought about how he was stubbornly unlucky in life as he lay on the bed in his room. He pondered whether this supervirus could somehow coexist with the poison, since it now had both. Would one bacteria possibly coexist with another in the dark space of his body? On the other hand, Chen pondered that he wouldn't be able to fight the supervirus right now. Last time he barely had enough to fight the diarrhea virus. Chen thought while lying on the couch that he was not destined to have anything to do with the life of ordinary people because of the old man. Although he had not stopped hating the old man, but the book might be useful to him. So Chen began to read. The book said there were 6 layers, and no one had yet managed to get to the 3rd. He was very interested in that. Chen thought about the fact that the old secret technique would indeed be difficult to master. The 9 Heavens technique is divided into 2 parts, Yu and Chen. Yu focuses on the use of elixirs and acupuncture, while Chen focuses on the development of internal energy. He changed the technique and called True TSU. Internal energy is a relatively tyrannical force, but its quantity is limited. And true QE is soft and has an inexhaustible supply. Chen thought that if he continued, his energy would increase. But he also thought that in order to defeat the sect, he would need to break through to the third layer. Then he will be able to perfect the elixir of longevity, which extends life by 3,000 years. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But it was immediately clear to Chung that in this case, it was not within his capabilities. The competition is 20 years away, and now Chen decided to devote all his free time to training. It would become his main occupation in business. Still, Chen was angry at the old man who had caused him trouble. But then the phone rang. It was Chu Yao Yao. It was her first time calling, and Chen didn't expect at all that she might call. She wondered why Chen hadn't come to work. He had to almost lie that he had such important things to do that he had even forgotten to call. It wasn't entirely untrue, though. She suddenly softened and asked me not to do it again, and also added that she would take the day off for him. Chen apologized, saying he would make it up to me. He invited Yao Yao to dinner as a thank you. She was kind of surprised. Dinner and a date at the same time? She said yes. Chen almost immediately regretted it and thought to himself why he had done it, but it was too late to refuse or cancel. Chen had just enough money to take the girl to a nice restaurant, not a drop more. But then Yao Yao started flirting, talking about other men who also asked her out, asked her to hang back, and Chen immediately agreed. But Yao Yao didn't fail to add that she missed Lafitte and hadn't been to the Champs-Élysées in a long time and would make time for him. It seemed to Chung that one Lafitte would be enough. He lashed out at girls who didn't count money. The phone rang, and Chen saw a completely different number. He picked up the phone because it could be money for a debt. He fidgeted, trying to remember who the phone number belonged to, and remembered. Chen picked up the phone and immediately asked if she wanted to pay him back an old debt. He wanted to say that he didn't mind at all. But he heard an appeal to him that it was the red scarf calling. Chen didn't realize what was going on. It was supposed to be her calling. That girl. Whose idea was it to play a prank on him? Chen became enraged. He started swearing, shouted into the phone, said he didn't know any red scarf, and hung up. He thought the guy on the other end of the wire was trying to scam him out of money. But then the phone rang again, and the voice in the receiver said that Chen's girlfriend was with him, and if he wanted to, he could say hello to her. This is wrong. Chen thought for a moment and then got angry. He thought about what to do first and how to help Sun. And she, when she was given the phone, began to warn Chen not to come because there are a lot of big guys here and he won't help her. The big guy took the phone away and started yelling at her to shut up, and he's the one talking here. Chen put the phone to his ear and asked what they needed from him and to let the girl go because she had nothing to do with it. The big guy said he'd give 30 minutes for Chen to get to the location, which he'd send to the phone. And if he brings the cops with him, he'll kill the girl. Chen replied to wait for him. He would be there very soon. Quickly, he jumped out of the building and rushed to the rescue. Chen was determined. He was infuriated by the people who dared to call him. On the other hand, the thugs had no intention of retreating either. They had not forgotten the fight and wanted revenge. The big boss ordered them to prepare for the meeting. They hoped to give Cheng a good beating. He wanted to blow Cheng's brains out and make mincemeat out of him. Maybe make some money, too. Sun was tied to a chair and was afraid that Uncle Chen would come and those fighters would kill and maim him. She thought about him all the time. Chen was rushing in the car, and it was as if he could hear her thoughts. But he was determined, if not more so. Her thoughts and Uncle Chen's gentle words made him want to go even faster, to save her as soon as possible. Rongrong and company caught Sun, tied her hands behind her and tied to a ladder, walked over and told her that when they were done with that bastard, he would make her want to die too. One of Rongrong's partners came up and asked him if they could handle the red scarf because he was strong and brave. He replied that they had nothing to fear. He also said that with Tao's brother supporting them, is there anyone who can beat them in Fuyami? They're the bravest and strongest group, and they're feared by the whole city. But Tao argued that it was not good to brag, and that there were people higher than other people, and there were those who were even higher than them. And he too has someone to piss on in Fuyami, and he is not the limit. Tao walked up to Sun and started a conversation with her. He told her that she was a little girl, and he was not a man who did not discriminate between wrongs. He was determined not to kill Sun. He only wanted Red Scarf. He told Sun so-and-so that if Red Scarf comes, he won't touch or bother her. He only has personal business with him. But Rongrong objected, telling Tao something he was wrong, and that Lin was the reason they were crippled. So he won't be happy until he kills the Red Scarf and disappears Sun to his death. To this, Tao replied that he was not worthy to have fun with such a pretty girl. And Sun had only one thought in her mind, what with not wanting to have fun with that vile scoundrel Tao, who fancies himself a hero. Tao told Rongrong that they have it by the book. The one who beat you up was Red Scarf, and as for the girl, she had nothing to do with you. Rongrong became furious and started yelling that if she had nothing to do with our case, then he, Tao, was a scumbag and just wanted to play with his brother's woman. Tao walked over to Sun and said that he was sorry that she had to go through all of this, but he also hoped that she could understand him. Sun was at a loss. She didn't know what to think or who to believe. She was scared. Tao also told Sun that he could call him Brother Tao, because Brother Tao's words have a certain weight in Fuyami. He told Rongrong that he was sorry for the offense he had caused and that he would make it up to him in the future. Rongrong did not believe him. Sun asked Tao not to go that far, but only to spare Uncle Chen, and for that she also promised to repay. Tao skeptically remarked that he was afraid there wouldn't be enough money to pay him. Tao told Sun like this: the country has its own laws and the family has its own rules. He can keep Chen Haoshan alive, but Chen will still have to give him an explanation, repent to him on his knees, and apologize. Sun said that he would get everything that was due to him. Tao replied that she couldn't do it all alone. Tao told Sun that she would understand his character when she had been with him for a long time. Rongrong snidely remarked that Tao had decided to pretend. That's when something hit the glass. Everyone fussed, got excited, and jumped out of their seats, all wondering what had happened and who had thrown at the glass. Chen was heading towards the bandits. He was in the building where the bandits were. He looked around and was determined. Rongrong noticed him first. He was surprised that Chen had come alone, but in his mind he only had thoughts of swift revenge. Everyone saw Chen, and Rongrong began to say that he was the bastard who called himself Red Scarf. Sun started yelling to Chung that he was the one running away from here because they have guns, and there are many of them, and he is the only one here. To this, Tao said that he had nowhere to run, that he's caught in traps, and he's not going anywhere from here. They all surrounded Chen, all had clubs, and all were in a belligerent mood. He was alone against the whole formidable gang. Tao told Chen that he had courage since he dared to come here alone. This act takes courage. Tao also told Chung that he had grown to respect him a bit for his coming and behavior. Chen, on the other hand, was having fun. He replied that it's well mother knows man or not, and chuckled, asking Tao if she had told him that. Tao became furious, angry, and shouted that Chen would be dead by tonight. He also began to shout angrily that this was his territory, and that Chen should have heard what was happening to those who crossed Tao's path. Chen shouted to Sun to wait a little longer, and he would get her out of here. The girl was very afraid. He also added that Sun didn't have to worry and that it was a free service today. The girl was surprised that Chung still had the strength to joke at such a time. Chen saw two battered guys, two losers from the day the fight happened. He was surprised and jeered at them, saying that once wasn't enough and they were here again. Rongrong attacked Chen, and Chen cheerfully told him that he didn't expect to see him here, adding that he had accidentally damaged his brain in the past. Rongrong shouted in rage that if Red Scarf didn't leave here today lying down, he wouldn't be considered a man. Chen accepted the challenge and told Rongrong that he had just slapped him, and then added that he was bald, and the challenge was accepted. Tao grinned and mouthed for Chen to worry less, and looked better at getting slapped himself. Chen began to twist his head left, right, as if kneading his neck, then took his head back. He kneaded his hands, saying that he didn't understand how such trash could get a foothold in Fuyang. Chen, also warming up, scoffed. He began to mock the gang, saying that their equipment and capabilities were far behind. Also noted with a laugh that they can't even be closely compared to the Japanese Yakuza and Italian Mafia. Tao gathered his men. He sat in front of them brooding, thinking and looking over his team. And then I wondered, what's wrong with this guy? And how come he wasn't scared at all in the face of such a powerful group? They thought of Chung, that he was just a poor and sullen boy, and that he had no one who could stand up for him. So Tao grabbed his baton and decided to try to pounce on Chen, but Chen stood unperturbed. The baton bounced strangely without hurting Chen. It was like a speck of dust had been swept away. In a strange way, the baton flew off, spun in the air, and struck Tao himself. Rongrong was dumbfounded by what he saw, and he thought that this couldn't be possible, that this only happened in fantasy movies. Tao had already realized that Chen was a fighter, and realized that he had underestimated him, and now he had to do something about it, or it would get worse. Then Tao gave his fighters a command to go forward. He ordered and sent them into the fray, watching what was happening. Tao ordered his fighters not to hold back and fight to the death, and they attacked Chen with fury. Rongrong was the one who rejoiced the most. He was jubilant that Brother Tao had finally gotten angry and wanted Chen to bleed all over his body and use the red scarf as a noose for the gallows. But the fighters had absolutely no way of defeating Chen somehow, and the batons and men bounced off of him. Chen was attacked by several fighters at the same time, but all were repulsed. They flew off in different directions. The fight was in full swing. Chen was alone in the center, and around him was an armed gang of scumbags who were all out for blood. Everyone was trying to get to Red Scarf, but no one succeeded. He surprisingly managed to fight back. Another blow, one more, and the bandit goes tumbling and falls dead, while Chen looks around for the next one. Chen jumped up, looking down on everyone, and his opponents stood and watched as if stunned, at a loss for words. Chen rushed like a tiger at his opponents and invariably won, and they fell to scatter. Tao was depressed and at a loss. He could not understand what was going on here.
All his men had been defeated, and they couldn't even touch his hair. He thought that even in the movies you couldn't see such a thing and couldn't believe it.
Sun was just as amazed. She thought Uncle Chen was really great, but she had never seen such a thing. Rongrong backtracked. He stopped beside Chen and began to mumble that he was his master now, began to apologize. Rongrong knelt before Chen and begged for mercy. He said he was a cripple now, and that there was nothing he could do. He kept apologizing and apologizing. Chen took pity on him and let him go, but he also said that it wasn't his turn yet. Before leaving, Chen looked back at Rongrong and muttered angrily that he would settle the score with him later. Rongrong fell to his knees and began to say that he would do whatever Chen ordered from now on, and would even treat Sun as his own sister. His assistant also fell to his knees and prayed that he hadn't done anything this time and he had nothing to do with it. And only Tao was saying that all was well and very well and telling Chen that he was nothing and no one. And Chen thought that Bald Tao's brain was not right, because after seeing what happened, he decided to stay. Tao said that he had been in the business for many years, but this was the first time he had faced such a difficult opponent. But even the most skillful masters are afraid of something. Qin guessed he was talking about the gun and suggested that Tao get it now. Tao hesitated and thought Chen was bluffing. Tao pulled a real gun out of his pocket and pointed it at Chen, smiling maliciously and threatening. Ranrong got excited and started laughing and asking Chen what was wrong with his head if he wasn't afraid of a gun. Ranrong began to say that Chen should kneel down and beg for forgiveness. Then maybe Brother Tao would have mercy and spare his dog's life. But Tao suddenly turned his gun on Ranrong. He fell to the ground, staring at Tao in fear. Tao threatened Ranrong that he was going to kill him now because he still dared to brag like a piece of shit, even though he was nothing. Ranrong started begging him not to do that. Tao admitted his failure and defeat in front of Chen. All he said was that he screwed up. Chen found out that Tao was holding a Glock 17, which he told him. He also said that he couldn't load domestic bullets in it because they could explode in the barrel. Tao replied that he could see that Chen didn't panic even when he saw the weapon, and he realized that if he admitted defeat, he would be left out of the picture. Then, he pointed the gun at Chen and said that he shouldn't pretend to be brave, and his fists couldn't outrun a bullet. Chen, however, replied that if Tao chose to disregard his goodwill, he would leave his life here. Then Chen laughed, turned to face Tao and asked if Tao knew why he was still here. Tao hesitated and didn't know what to say. He fidgeted and fidgeted, averting a pitying gaze. Chen said that if Tao had just shot him, he would be guaranteed to be a corpse by now. But Tao is weak, and that's why he's afraid to shoot. Tao freaked out and started yelling that he wasn't afraid to shoot that he would kill today. But the gun suddenly fell out of Tao's hands, causing Tao's mouth to drop open, and he could only stand there and stare. The gun flew into the air, spun in the air, and jumped into Chen's hand by itself. When the gun was in Chen's hands, he turned it around and pointed it at Tao. Chen pointed the gun at Tao and said he was still playing dirty when Chen played with the gun, asking how much was that piece of crap worth. When he heard that Tao gave 50,000 for the gun, he said he was an idiot. It turned out to be a fake, and the pin is so crooked it doesn't even fire. Tao fell to his knees in front of Chen begging for mercy. He cried and sobbed, begged and pleaded. Chen sat on his knees and begged for mercy. He was telling Brother Chen that he was really wrong, and he realized it. Chen told Tao that there was no need to talk about it anymore, and it was better to show sincerity. Tao, meanwhile, pulled out a knife. He was scowling and fierce. He had never had a fight like this before. He was about to attack Chen, threatening him with a knife. He uttered words that sounded like growls and howls. Tao grew fierce, his eyes bloodshot as he glared at Chen with a sizzling, hateful gaze. But Chen didn't even think of being afraid. Of course he wasn't afraid of the knife. He just watched to see what would happen next. Tao was furious with rage. His eyes were as bloodshot as a bull in a bullfight. His teeth gritted. He laughed and stabbed himself in both legs with the knife. There was no call from his lips. He only clenched his teeth and lips tighter. But it seemed to Chenny that it wasn't sincere enough yet, and there would be something else. Tao then told Chen that he had an elderly grandmother and a young wife in his care, and what would happen to them if he left them alone. He kneeled down and promised that if he ever offended anyone again, and even if he was grieved by dogs, he would not complain. Tao then turned to Miss Sun. He recalled that he had been kind to her and protected her from the gang guys, so he asked for help this time. Sun interceded for him, turning to Chen. She said that she thought Tao had already been punished enough, and she was sure he wouldn't do anything bad in the future. So we can just forget about it. Chen told Tao that he would only spare him for the sake of his grandmother. Chen was sincere. He had seen enough. Chen told Tao he could go, and the latter, gratefully for his generosity, withdrew. But Chen stopped him at the exit. He smiled a little and began to talk without anger. He recalled that he wanted to explain what he meant when he said he wasn't sincere and showed a small bill. Tao thought that Chen would blackmail him again. However, he didn't show any sign of it and continued to listen. Chen started to say that he didn't have time to eat and spent a lot of money on a cab, and he was also scared. Tao said that Brother Chen is right, and moral compensation should be given, and for Chen to say the amount, and he will reimburse everything. Then Chen said that he is a small spender, and so he is asking for a little only $1 million. Tao exclaimed in surprise. He didn't think $1 million was a small sum. But still Tao agreed, asked Chen for his card, and said he would transfer the money tomorrow. Chen untied Sun, walked over to her and told her they were okay now and could leave. But suddenly Sun paused, looking around. Her eyes were filled with amazement, doubt, and delight at the same time. Tao gave Chung a business card, saying that if he ever needed anything in the future, he could always call. Chen thanked Tao and took the business card. You could tell from the outside that they parted as buddies. Tao also gave his car keys, muttering that it would be more comfortable for them to get back home that way. Chen took Tao's car keys and thanked him. The car was big and expensive. Tao must have paid a lot of money for it. Chen and Sun went to the car, intending to get in and go home. So they did, with Chen at the wheel, Sun next to him in the front seat. The car was not only of good quality, but also fast enough. Houses and trees flashed by. Cars raced through the city at night. Sun tried to thank Chen in the car. If it wasn't for him, something very bad could have happened to her. Chen said that she had already repaid him in every way she could, and there was no need for her to thank him today. Moreover, Chen said that she was Brother Sun's daughter, and since they have such a close relationship, she doesn't need to be compensated for the travel expenses either. And Sun said that Chen had just blackmailed Boss Tao for $1 million, so naturally he did not need to reimburse the expense of the car ride. Chen was indignant. He was not blackmailing anyone. He is just the kind of person it is called moral hazard, he worried. Sun thought Chen he was nervous, and maybe he was nervous about her and really cared about her. But she stopped herself. After all, Chen was her uncle and she had a boyfriend she liked. But in fact she was very sad and wanted to cry. She didn't know why, but Chen Haoshan really looked very cool. The car raced through the streets of the city. Sun said that she seriously found Chung to be an amazing person. Chen thought for a moment, and then said that he was just a normal guy, like a lot of guys. It's just that she doesn't know many guys. Sun replied that he has single-handedly defeated so many bandits, and still says he's ordinary. In her opinion, that's too humble of him. Some smiled and asked why she shouldn't call him brother from today. But Chen resisted. Besides, he had given the chance to call him that at the beginning. Sun pronounced that she regretted it. Chen was only a few years older than her, and she felt uncomfortable calling him uncle all the time. Chen replied that he and her father are old friends. It would be right for him to call her uncle, so Sun should accept it. He will never call her little sister. Sun thought for a moment. She was very sad, but she knew it was right. Chen was an uncle, not a brother. She lowered her eyes and said, "Let it be." She looked out the window, remembering everything that had happened to her. Chen drove her to the house and told her it was time for her to go home and he would wait until she got up and the lights came on. The girl walked slowly toward the house without turning around, and Chen watched her go, so young and beautiful. But just before entering, Sun turned around and said that she had gotten some feeling about him. Chen interjected what that feeling was, though inside himself he knew what she meant. Sun said she feels like he has built a high wall in his heart. At first glance, he is very social and caring. But as soon as anyone even wants to get close to Chung, he puts up a high wall. Sun continued that whoever wanted to approach him would only face a large cold wall. Chen pretended not to understand. He said she was talking too complicated, and he hadn't even finished elementary school, so he didn't understand what she was talking about. In fact, he knew everything, but he didn't want to accept it and repeated that he didn't understand her. Sun said again that she had been jealous of those who had older brothers since she was a child, and she wanted to treat him like that, like a brother. She didn't mean anything else. She also said he's a very good driver, and his driving skills are even much better than experienced cab drivers. She also realized that he knows martial arts and he has such great skills. So why did he choose to work as a janitor? Chen replied that cleaning dirty things gave him a sense of satisfaction, and was it bad to work as a janitor? Sun thought about it and muttered that his reasoning sounded good but not convincing. Surely he must have been through a lot. She wanted to come closer but didn't dare, and only uttered that his mind and body were exhausted. Maybe cleaning is a way to relax her spirit, Sun asked. Chen replied that she was embellishing things a lot and she was still a very young girl. Chen added that he doesn't even have a driver's license, he is self-taught, and has only gotten behind the wheel a few names. Getting into the car, Chen said one last time, "Stop worrying about him. She herself is very tired and doesn't she want to go home?" Sun replied that she knows what's in his heart, and she also thinks he should return the car to the person he took it from. Chen said he understood, and got into the car and drove away. Sun thought about how Uncle Chen must have been through a lot of things she couldn't even imagine. Chen, meanwhile, was riding in the car and thinking that this little girl was so young and so good-looking. But her youth and beauty does not prevent her from guessing such different things that Chen himself has chased away. Finally, the day was coming to an end. It had been difficult and stressful. Chen was finally able to take a full breath and exhale. He got cold. He thought it was outside, but it was just the sunroof open. Chen drove looking through the open sunroof and thinking how many stars there are in the sky. What a beautiful sky at night. When was the last time he had looked at the stars? Chen couldn't even remember that day. It must have been when he was a child. Chen stopped the car near the ATM and thought that tomorrow he would have $1 million. So in honor of that, he could treat himself to a little something delicious. He got out of the car, went to the nearest ATM, took out a bank card, and withdrew the money. Chen noticed someone watching him from around the corner. He hesitated. The shadow moved. He went back to the ATM. The shadow hid. Chen thought to himself that it was probably a pickpocket, and he wondered if he would dare to act and how it would be done. And then Chen saw that it was a girl. He thought it was a young girl, small with dark hair. He thought it was a shame that at such a young age the girl had made such a choice to become a stockman. But Chung really wanted to see how the girl was going to steal his money from him. How would she act? Suddenly she stopped right in front of him and exclaimed not to leave and called him brother. Chen thought that if this was her first robbery, it was very unprofessional. The girl didn't know what to say at first. Then she lowered her gaze and quietly asked if he had withdrawn a lot of money. Chen wondered if his sister thought that was a very harsh question and heard back that she would change the question. She asked if he needed a favor. Chen asked what kind of service she could offer and in response heard, "One that would make you happy." Chen decided to call it a day. He turned around saying that he didn't need it and she'd better look for someone else. But the girl followed him and seeing that he did not stop, began to ask him to wait. The girl caught up with Chung and said that she didn't need much, but she needed money. Then she blocked his way and started claiming it was going to cost him cheap. Chung wasn't even interested in how cheap it was. The point was that he didn't need it. The girl cried. She couldn't stop her tears for a long time. They kept rolling out of her eyes, and then she said that she only needed 20,000. Chen was angry. He thought she had mistaken him for a major. 20,000 isn't a small amount of money. He could find a dozen people like her for that money. The girl started telling me that she was a university student, and it was her first time, and her friend said that's how much it cost and pulled out her student ID. Chen looked at the student ID, recognized her name as Tintin, and didn't believe she was a student, noting that the ticket might be fake. Tim asked that he take her student ID and ID card and check with one branch of the university. Chen, on the other hand, tossed her ID and tickets onto the pavement, advising her to go home to her mom. The documents were lying on the pavement near Tim's feet, and she didn't even try to pick them up. Then she did. Tintin says her mom is still in the hospital, and also that she can do anything he wants for 15 grand. The girl began to beg, to plead, to beg him to hear her and help her. Just 15,000 and she would do anything he wanted. Chen stood there without moving. He looked at the girl, feeling sorry for her for some reason. He looked around. There was no one around. He begged Grandpa to take me in. This comic doesn't make sense to me. Tintin cried even more. It looked like the crying was going to turn into sobs and then into hysterics. Chen thought she looked as helpless as he once was. Then he said that if she had already made up her mind, then let her follow him. The two of them walked down the road together, and Chen told her they would get a room at the hotel. They found a first-class hotel, and Chen took a room in it. The room had all the comforts of home and was in the center of the city. She sat down on the bed and waited, but Chung was not there. Some time passed. The girl was very thoughtful and didn't realize where he was, this guy who had brought her here. There was the sound of a key. The door creaked open and he appeared. He came in, threw off his jacket, and looked at the girl. Chen said he went to the ATM to withdraw money and brought her 20,000. She nodded, and Chen said it was cold and that she should pour him a glass of warm water to warm him up. Tintin brought him water, for which he thanked her, and told her to go and take a bath now. Tim asked him if she could recognize his name while calling him brother. Chen replied that it was not necessarily possible to do without a name. He was thoughtful and a little wordy. Tintin agreed with that. There was nothing left for her to do, though it was strange in her opinion. Chen sat silent and didn't say anything. He just kept thinking about something, and she did not interrupt his silence. But then he suddenly spoke out. Chen Haoshan, 25 years old. Profession is janitor at Cloud Fuyang Company. Tim was surprised that the guy was a janitor. Chen chuckled, saying that it was a little hard to believe that I was a janitor because it wasn't a respectable profession at all. But Tintin replied that the quality of a person is more important than any external things. Then Chen said that now was not the time to philosophize, and Tintin would have time there to think about whether she should do it in the bathroom. Tintin then asked to close the bathroom door to be alone. Chen didn't have anything against it. Entering the bath, Tintin began to think about the fact that she thought he seemed very different from other men. Usually men looked at her with eyes full of lust. She'd been hit on with all sorts of innuendos and propositions, but this guy wasn't like that. Tintin seemed like this guy didn't do such a thing, and it seemed like he just wanted to help her. Standing under the shower, Tintin wondered how much the cleaning staff was paid. 20,000 was not a small amount of money. She didn't know what to expect, but she wanted to play her part tonight, since that was the case, and began to clean herself up. Tintin came out of the bathroom and said she was done showering. She was pretty, with clean, smooth hair and matte skin. Chen looked at her and his gaze expressed nothing. The girl could not catch anything but indifference in his gaze. Most likely he remembered himself as a child, small and defenseless as he had once been. And how sorry he felt for himself then. A snow-white sheet lay on the clean bed. It was meant to replace the blanket. Chen tore the sheet off the bed and covered the girl with it. After that, he turned away and looked out the window and looked at the houses. Tintin hesitated for a moment. She couldn't figure out what was going on. She wasn't scared, but she wanted certainty. She turned to Chen and asked if he had changed his mind. Perhaps he had other plans or didn't like her. Chen said he wasn't in the mood today, but he always takes care of his promises, and so she wouldn't lose a dime of what she deserved. He took out the money, showed it to Tintin, but said she had to give a reason first, why she had decided to take such a step. Tintin thought for a long time and didn't know what to say. She wondered if what she was about to say would be meaningful, but Chen was adamant that he must find out why she had decided to sell herself. At first Tintin asked, "What does this have to do with the deal?" But then changed her mind and said she could tell. She said that her mom was in the hospital and needed an operation and needed the money for tomorrow. If she didn't get it, her mom would be in danger. Chen asked if 20,000 yuan would solve all the problems of her mother's illness. Or is this money only needed temporarily? If that money isn't enough, what will she do? Sell herself further? Tintin replied that she would do anything to make sure Mom survived just to make Mom feel good. Then Chen offered to solve her mom problem for good. He would give her 200,000 yuan for 2 years in advance, and she would clean and cook for him whenever he needed her. Tim didn't believe it. She thought he was joking because for that kind of money you could hire a professional cleaner and cook. Then Chen said he wasn't giving them for nothing. She would have to pay them back when she had a job, and an additional 10%. Tintin cried, thanked him, and said he was a really good man. And Chen thought to himself that 10% in 2 years was called not a good person. After a while, Chen gave Tintin 20,000 and said he would transfer the rest of the amount to her within 3 days after signing the contract. Tintin was a little hesitant. She asked if it was his wife's money and Chen was only thinking of getting her to sign sooner. Tintin signed the contract that she was to receive the full amount. She was happy. Chen took the contract, muttering that it was good, and that he was leaving with a calm heart. Besides, he is satisfied. Lastly, he said that Tim must not do anything stupid again, or her mother would be very upset. Tintin offered Chung to stay and rest at her place. She hoped that she liked the guy a little bit and he would accept. Chung asked not to make a scene because if he couldn't control himself, what kind of man would he be? What kind of man would he be? Tintin was alone. She had never met such young men in her life. Her thoughts were occupied only with him and what had happened to her. She undressed and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She replayed over and over again the night they'd met. Mentally, she was talking to her mom, telling her that she had met a good man today. And Chen walked the streets of the city and thought that he had sponsored a student, and if the old man found out about it, he would laugh at him. But he decided to forget about it and practice harder today. Next day, Cloud Faience Company. Chen came to work sleepy. He kept yawning, and even his yawns made tears drip. In the elevator, Chen thought that he still hadn't gotten enough sleep tonight, no matter how hard he tried, and that he should make up for it tonight. The phone rang with the sound of an incoming message. Chen reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Looking into it, he saw that he had 1.5 million in his account, which was 500,000 more than he expected. Tao wrote a message that he had a little more money, so he added more. Chen replied that he had left his car at the warehouse, and Tao thanked him. They exchanged a few more sentences. Chen thought that he had not met such a generous person, and that the one was not so stupid and he might be useful in the future. Chen stepped out of the elevator and an exclamation of surprise escaped from his mouth. He was indeed surprised. There was a girl standing in front of him. The first thing he noticed was the beautiful feet in fine, expensive shoes. Chen, coping with his surprise, said hello and asked the girl how she was doing, to which she replied that it was an interesting coincidence that they had met again. In front of him stood a beautiful, well-dressed, smelling of expensive perfume, Lin Yumu. Chen and Lin Yumu stood in different corners of the elevator, turning away from each other, he with a mop and bucket, and she with a business bag. Chen started joking around and said he forgot to post something on the forum. He had been meaning to for a long time, but was too lazy. The girl replied that if he dared to do so, he would be in trouble. And Chen kept teasing her and saying that she thought he wouldn't dare. But a couple of days would pass and she would look.
Lin was furious. She couldn't handle her feelings and told the guy that he was mean and shameless.
Chen walked up to Lin closely and turned her around to face him. They looked at each other with eyes full of rage. Chen muttered that she was wasting her time messing with him. He wasn't at all what he seemed. Lin was ready to tear him into little pieces. Chen brought his face closer to Lin's face and uttered quite clearly and plainly that he was a very mean and completely unscrupulous person. Lin shouted for him to shut up immediately and thought to herself that this guy was very despicable. And how could she, the chairman of the board, lose to some janitor? Lin told Chen that she had met many like him and that he could never scare her. She was too busy right now to worry about him, and advised her to get the hell out so she would never see him again. Chen replied that he had heard her, but only that she should never recant because he didn't like women he couldn't get rid of. Lin was outraged. She was furious. How could he have only imagined that she would seek out a meeting with the janitor? The elevator went up as slowly as it seemed. For a high-speed elevator, very slow. They arrived at the 40th floor. Lin proudly walked out of it with her head held high and went to her office, while Chen got out and went to clean the offices and bathrooms on all the floors. Lin was outraged to the extreme, and all she could think about was revenge and how she could get one of these to this insolent man. Yao Yao, meanwhile, sitting at the security camera monitor, saw the whole fight between Lin and Chen. She was trying to figure out what Chen had done, what had happened between them. What terrible quarrel. Why was her sister so angry with him and almost hated him? Lin burst into her sister's office, and the only first question she asked was how the case with that scumbag janitor was going. Yao Yao replied that she had a lot of work to do. She wasn't on the case. To change the subject, Yao Yao asked her sister why she hadn't come to work for a few days. Maybe she had a new boyfriend, and that was it? Lin replied that she didn't have a new boyfriend, but things are much worse. It's possible that she'll get married soon. Yao Yao was outraged because they were going to get married at the same time. She started to accuse her sister of betrayal, but Lin said she was very worried, and that's why she came to do it with Yao Yao. What on earth could have happened? Why is Lin going to get married in such a hurry, breaking the vows she made to her sister? Yao Yao thought about it and asked her sister who this person was, but Lin was embarrassingly silent. Then Yao Yao began to guess and asked if it was Su Xiaolei again. Xiaolei was not a decent person and had been messing with Lin's head for a long time, while he led an idle life. He was once accused of abandoning a pregnant woman. In front of Su Xiaolei's parents and many other people, a pregnant woman scolded him as an irresponsible scumbag playing with women. Yao Yao was outraged. She was also sure that he was a scumbag, very dishonest and a total scumbag. Also, Yao Yao expressed that she doesn't understand what happened to Lin's father. Why is he looking at this bastard with a human face as his only daughter's future husband? Lin replied that Su Xiaolei is the future president of SU Group, and he is not only handsome, but also has good manners and knows how to make himself comfortable. So he charmed his father. But most importantly, Su Xiaolei was very much liked by his parents. He managed to make them feel so comfortable with him that they thought Lin would be happy with him. Yao Yao countered that he looks like a hypocrite, and it's very easy to recognize that if only to get in close contact with him. Lin agreed with that, but her father was very sick on top of that, and the doctor said that time was short, and he wanted to make his daughter happy in his lifetime. Yao Yao understood. Uncle was at death's door and wanted to finish all earthly matters. That's why she wanted to marry off her daughter so quickly, and there was only Sue as a candidate. And then Yao Yao had what she thought was an amazing idea. Dad should give Dad a choice and bring home a guy who was better than Su Xiaolei. Lin was wary. She didn't like the idea at all, which she told her sister immediately. Yao Yao argued that it was a great idea. It would satisfy Uncle Lin's desire to see his daughter happy and bring Su Xiaolei out into the open. He would puncture himself and show everyone who he really is. Ellen thought about it, but then began to reason out loud that a guy is not a Peking cabbage and does not grow quickly on a bed. Where would she get such a guy? She didn't have anyone right now. But Yao Yao immediately came up with the idea that they might not be able to find a real boyfriend, but they could find a fake boyfriend. Yao Yao assumes it won't be easy, but she thinks she can find the right person to trust, and she'll do it all for her sister. Lin replied that that would be perfect. She has such high hopes for her sister. For now, since she hasn't come to the company for a few days, she'll go deal with things. Yao Yao hugged her sister and told her to go to work and not to worry about anything. She needed to attend to the company's business. Yao Yao is a very thinking girl. She thought it wouldn't be hard at all to find the right person. And only one man came to her mind at once, in whose decency she somehow had no doubts. Chen Haoqian. That guy really likes money. Yao Yao will make him her sister's boyfriend. She'll have nowhere to go, and will vomit blood as soon as she sees him. The plan was perfect. Yao Yao put aside her devious thoughts and started thinking about how to arrange a meeting. Chen's phone rang. He thought it was early, and since he didn't get many calls, he was interested. He saw that it was Yao Yao, and immediately thought that she was going to invite him to dinner or something. There was no other occasion. He talked to her on the phone and asked her what was going on and if she was okay. Yao Yao replied that she was not doing well because he had forgotten to invite her to dinner. Chen began to object and guffaw, and eventually invited Yao Yao to the restaurant and asked her to set a time. The girl replied that she was downstairs and they could go right away. Chen was upset that his luck was so bad. He had just lost a lot of money yesterday, and today he would be scammed again at an expensive restaurant. Chen put aside all his cleaning chores. He took the inventory, locked everything up, and went down to the parking lot. There were many cars in the parking lot. Chen walked along the rows and found Yao Yao's car already waiting for him. Chen opened the door, smiled, said hello again, looked around to see if anyone else was around and got into the car. Yao Yao was lovely, pretty, and fresh. She asked with a dazzling smile where to go, where would they have lunch. Chen replied that even last time they were going to the Champs-Élysées, that's where they should go, and thought to himself that it was very wasteful. On the way, Yao Yao was silent, pensive and sad, which was not her usual expression. She was usually talkative. Chen asked what was his problem, why she was silent all the time. Why did she call him and what was on her mind? And then Yao Yao paused the car, turned to Chen and confessed that she needed Chen to do her a small favor. Yao Yao couldn't dare to say the favor they wanted to ask Chen. He asked again more insistently. But she just looked at him and then turned away. Chen insisted. He was really perplexed as to what he might be needed for. Yao Yao hesitated, opened her mouth and even uttered that she and her sister wanted him to. But to herself, Yao Yao felt insecure and responsible for what was happening, and thought that she wasn't ready to tell it yet. She would have to think about it in more detail. They rode in the car in silence again, and Chen was getting more and more interested. Then he asked her why she was silent. What was the big secret? And what had happened to need him? When they arrived at the restaurant, Yao Yao went inside, and Chen stopped, as if hesitant to enter. The girl began to call out to him. She said that the steak and wine at the restaurant were great, and that there was no need to stand there like a statue in front of the entrance. They entered the hall of the restaurant. The hall was really magnificent. Everything sparkled with glitter and luxury. There was almost no one inside. The waiters started paying attention to them. They whispered, "The girl with the short hair is so beautiful and gorgeous, but this guy with her, he didn't look like he could pay the bill." They sat down at a table. Chen was upset, but Yao Yao was cheerful. She asked if he liked the atmosphere here. Chen replied that it was just a place to eat. "Can't you do that somewhere else?" Yao Yao argued that he was wrong. It was her first time dining alone with a man, so she had to choose a proper place to remember the moment. Besides, she couldn't shame herself. Chen called the waiter over. He brought the menu. Yao Yao ordered 2 steaks, a fruit salad, and a bottle of 92 Lafite. She thought that this bottle was worth at least 20,000, and when Chen found out about it, he would definitely spit blood into his own plate. But out loud she asked, what did she think he was upset about? Chen replied that he was certainly upset. That wine would have to cost a few hundred, and the whole meal is about 1,000, and with his salary, it will be overpriced. She was amazed. She didn't even know what to think. Chen turns out to think everything here is so cheap. The girl asked Chen, does he really think a 92nd year Lafite is worth a few hundred? Does he live in a different world and not know the prices? Chen slyly replied that he thought he could afford to pay for everything today. The waiter brought the steak and salad and served it all on the table. Yao Yao thought that she had given him over 20,000 yuan for the hospital bill the other day, so it looked like she would have to pay for everything today. When the wine arrived, Chen asked how much it cost. The waiter replied that a 92nd year Lafite costs 21,000 yuan in this restaurant. He tasted it and said it was very expensive, and he thought a dry red wine from the supermarket for $50 would be much better than this. The waiter didn't understand and was confused. He tried to appeal to Yao Yao, and she told him not to worry that her friend was just joking, but she thought Chen was up to something again. Yao Yao was indignant that Chen could say such a thing about Lafite. It's a very famous wine. The guy asked in response, what does Yao Yao know about red wine? The girl was embarrassed as she really didn't know anything about wines. Then she asked Chen, what did he know about wines? Chen said he doesn't know much about wine, but he does remember emptying Old Man Rothschild's entire collection. The look on the old man's face was hilarious, but it doesn't matter much now. Yao Yao didn't lag behind with a question. The young man replied that he was a simple janitor and only knew how to sweep floors, but the internet says that the 92nd year Lafite is made of a mixture of pine cones and violets. Chen also said that when drinking Lafite, it was hard to even taste jasmine, let alone pine cones and violets. And Yao Yao thought that he wouldn't be able to taste any flavor. He objected that he had a very sensitive sense of smell. Even if he were blind, he could find a man in a crowd by his body odor. The girl feigned surprise and said that if it's true, then she wants to test it. Will Chen be able to remember her sister's scent that is on Yao Yao? Chen replied that Yao Yao definitely has a familiar scent on her. She really smells like someone. And then he asked if it was the rude girl he met in the elevator today, her sister. Yao Yao was surprised. She said it wasn't bad that he guessed. And while we're on the subject, she was really curious. What did Chen do to make her so angry? Chen remembered how things went down, but replied at first that it was nothing special. He was silent for a while, pretending to remember, and then he told me everything as it was and stopped talking. Yao Yao thought this guy was crazy. How could he do that to her sister? He's just a devil. Lin has such a beautiful face. Chen pretended not to see Yao Yao's disappointment. He said that since they were done, he figured it was time for them to go, and added that she should wait for him in the car, and he would be there in a minute. Yao Yao was surprised that they couldn't leave together. He replied that she wouldn't be able to run as fast as him and would be a burden to him. She didn't understand and asked what he meant. Chen winked and kept humoring and amusing himself. He asked her if he should say it outright. It was of course all about the food. She didn't impress him at all. Yao Yao was surprised and angry. She realized that Chen wasn't going to pay for dinner. Doesn't he have the money she gave him earlier? He replied that the laugh feed in this restaurant is fake, and he won't pay for fake. Yao Yao resented that even if the wine is fake, that's no reason to stage an escape. Chen objected and said that she could ask someone to confirm the authenticity if she didn't believe it. The girl thought about it. For some reason, she felt that Chen was not joking, and that it would be a sight to behold. She said she would wait for Chung in the car and left. Meanwhile, Chen ordered 2 more steaks for himself. He looked at the departing Yao Yao and thought that the old man was right. There was a devil in every man, and smirked. Chung was brought the steaks, and he finished every last bite, savoring and chewing thoroughly. The young man then pretended that he wasn't feeling well, and had a burp and heartburn. The waiter came over and asked if he wanted to pay the bill. Chen replied that he would, of course, pay the bill, but that he would have to wait a minute and looked around for a way out. The waiter stood in bewilderment because China was not at the table in an instant. He had simply vanished. The waiter started shouting to the whole room. He called for security and shouted that the man was running away without paying his bill. Chen was running away and running away. There were shouts from all sides. People shouted that it was a terrible shame to come to the Champs-Élysées to eat for free and leave without paying. There was a car waiting outside the restaurant with Yao Yao in it. She was nervous and kept glancing at the restaurant's exit. Yao Yao was worried, angry, and dissatisfied. She kept wondering what was going on there. She saw Chung rushing out of the door and almost ran to the car, with security guards and waiters flashing through the windows. Yao Yao opened the door for him. Chen yelled at her to start the car and give her gas. She replied that she understood, and when the guy jumped in, she stepped on the gas. The car sped away, and the waiters and security guards, swearing, were left with nothing. But they did not call the police, because they did not see the license plate number. Yao Yao and Chen carried on through the city. He said she was going very fast. The girl replied that if someone caught her, it would ruin her reputation, and she had a deputation to maintain. Yao Yao stopped the car and told Chung that he could get out here. She doesn't want to ride in the same car with him anymore. Chen said she could have at least given him a ride into town. As it was, he would have to splurge on a cab. She replied that he had saved over 20,000 yuan, and she had things to do, and would just leave him here. As Yao Yao was leaving, she reprimanded him not to be late for work tomorrow. Chen stayed in the middle of the highway. He thought it was strange to catch a cab in this such a shitty place, so far from the city. Then he decided to just go for a walk and walked home. He walked along the highway, admiring the nature and the clear night sky. Suddenly, behind him, he heard the scraping of a car, the only one on this highway. Chen didn't pay much attention to it. He didn't even think or imagine who it was that was rushing about. He suddenly thought it might be the enemy. There was a loud bang and a screech of brakes. Chen didn't even have time to realize anything. He had been hit by a car. The car pulled away slightly and braked sharply, and Chen was left lying on the bare pavement. A girl jumped out of the car. She was so scared that she didn't know what to do or where to run to. She grabbed her phone and looked around her helplessly. It was Lin. Chen thought that there was really an enemy and what an enemy was in his way, or rather, knocked him down. Lin was confused, if not panicked. She walked over to Chen and asked how he was feeling, and if he could get up. Chen didn't answer anything. Lin thought she had knocked him to death. Lin jumped out of the car. First she froze as if she didn't know what to do. Then she threw herself at the man she had hit. She wanted to call someone, but her phone was dead. She was confused and didn't know what to do or how to act. She realized that she had just hit a man with her car, but couldn't figure out what she should do. It wasn't until Chen realized that it was Qing Yao Yao's older sister. So she's also the CEO of the company. But for some reason, Lin suddenly had the strange thought that this case was a good opportunity for extortion. Chen raised his hand and began to call out to her, making signs and letting her know he was moving. Lin bent down and was glad to see that the boy was still alive. She bent down to see the face and was very surprised to see that it was Chen. He was definitely someone she never thought she would see. She started apologizing, saying that she hit him by accident and asked where his phone was. She wanted to call an ambulance now because her phone was dead. Chen said he assumed the phone had crashed. The young man could hardly breathe, but still asked if the beauty was not avenging him for personal offenses, and added that even if he was wrong about something in this life, he was not ready to die like that. Lin was upset and indignant. She asked to stop talking and thinking like that. She really didn't want that and asked him to tell her where his phone was so she could call an ambulance right away. Chen whispered that it was too late, that he felt he didn't have long to live. His life was so hard in his 20s. He never got married, and he was already going to see his ancestors. Lin thought it was all her fault. She kept thinking about Chung, and although she hated him, he was still a living person and she felt sorry for him. He said he didn't blame her, but before he died, he asked her to fulfill his little request. It wouldn't be hard for her to do. Lin asked that he forgive her. She shouldn't be distracted while driving. She didn't want that. So if there was anything she could do to help, she would honor any request he made. Chen asked me to transfer some money to his bank account. Lin was very surprised at just such a request. He explained that he has been poor for over 20 years and wants to move quickly to prosperity and become a millionaire before he dies, so he won't be ashamed to meet his parents when he dies. Otherwise, he didn't live up to their expectations. Lin thought that since Chen was thinking about meeting his parents, he must be an orphan. Lin agreed, asking for his bank card. She promised to transfer the money right away. Chen immediately held out his phone and said the account and bank coordinates were in it. Lin transferred the money and Chen asked to see how much was there. She thought how poor this man was in his past life that he has such a great obsession with money even before his death. However, they were not alone. Someone was eavesdropping on them, and that someone thought there was a story behind the incident, and that someone decided to find out. A gang of thugs approached the lying Cheng and Lin, and their red-haired leader was with them. He said he was damn curious to know what was going on here. The leader approached Lin, said his name was Ah Qian. He's the boss, and he's got his biker friends with him. And they're having a good time. The girl answered that only very bad people, if they see someone in an accident, not only don't want to help, but also get in the way and say all sorts of stupid things. She added that they have no conscience. Chen heard everything and became worried. What is going on here? While he was thinking about how to get out of this delicate situation and get money, some strange people appeared. They're here to cause trouble. And Qian asked Lin, how does she know if he has a conscience if they just met? And added that it looked like the guy on the road couldn't be saved, but don't let her worry. He stepped closer, almost right up close, and squinted, whispering that if she served him and his brothers well, he would testify in her favor. Lin's whole body shuddered and bent in half with nausea because of those words and Qian's disgusted look. But she found her strength and said with fury in her voice that he would be very sorry for what he had said today. Well, Chen kept pretending, lying on the side of the road. Chin told Lin that she was a little girl, and that she didn't need to pretend to be brave and daring. It would only make him angry. He walked over to her and took her by the chin, lifted her up and whispered that she was lucky he had a good temper. Others wouldn't have been so polite. Lin slapped him so hard that his head turned. She called him a scumbag and called him a bastard. Qian became furious. His eyes became bloodshot. He roared that if he didn't do something to Lin today, he would be ashamed to be called a man. Lin was also furious. She was filled with such determination and anger that the trees seemed to sway and the wind rose. She stared straight ahead with such ferocity that everyone was frightened. The fury came from her. She started fighting with Qian, hitting him again and again. Everyone even retreated a few steps. It was so unexpected. Chen lay there chuckling and thought that this was such a horrifying sight that he didn't even know if he wanted to watch. In fact, he sees everything and knew that Lin would fight back. Qian was furious that Lin dared to fight with him and raise her hand against him. He ordered that little brat to be brought to him. After that, his gang could have some fun with her. Everyone chuckled, and everyone rushed to fulfill Qian's order, hoping to amuse themselves. Lin stood up and said loudly, "It's very presumptuous of them to act like this. Are there still people who dare to touch the Lin family? After today, she would let them feel the price of their actions." Everyone suddenly stopped and froze. Lin's family? Could she be from the same family that the whole country knows? Chen thought of Lin too, and it turns out that the background of this beauty is not so simple. But Qian laughed in her face and said that he knew who she was. She's Ling Yumu. But if she thinks her family has some stinking money, then they are an imperial family? As if that's not the case. He said his Qian family is a political family. At all times, businessmen were afraid of officials. Qian then urged his brothers to do what he ordered, and he would deal with the consequences himself. Lin replied that this was a big surprise to her. The Qian family, which had always been known for its prudence, had a bastard like him. She also apologized to Chen for not being able to save him. The girl even thought it was retaliation for treating Chung so badly and hitting him with her car. Lin once again looked at the guy who was still lying on the road and sincerely apologized to him. Already dirty paws were ready to touch her. The big guys came from all sides and tried to reach Lin. She tried to pull back and resist. Then, someone's boot slammed right into the ringleader's face, breaking his nose, jaws, and crushing his entire face. Qian fell down. Suddenly, Chen jumped up from the ground, stood firmly on the ground, and got into a fight with everyone. With a few punches, he dispersed everyone away from the girl. Lin was confused. She couldn't understand what was going on. How did Chen wake up, and how could he have so much strength to deal with a whole gang? Chen Haoqian stood alone in front of all the thugs, and they were so frightened that they were afraid to approach, because anyone who dared to do so would fly away. Lin asked Chen how this could be happening, if he wasn't dead, and how he was able to get up. Chen replied that he was fine, calling her a girl. Then he added that she shouldn't worry because as long as he was here, none of these people would be able to touch her today. But then Chen asked in a confused manner, "What is this place, and why is he here?" Lin was confused and couldn't find anything to say. The guy kept pretending. He pretended not to recognize Dean, asking why she was looking at him like that. Lin was so confused, she didn't know what to think. Lin looked at Chung carefully and wondered if he remembered her. Had he completely forgotten who she was? Chen said the girl must be mistaken. He had been gathering herbs on Mount Wudang all his life, and just as he came down the mountain, he felt dizzy, and his eyes darkened. And then he woke up here. Chen turned against the bikers and pronounced that there was something wrong with these people. They are dressed so strangely. Perhaps they are members of a demon sect. He calmly looked at them and asked, how dare they be rude to a woman? Then added that today the deity must act on behalf of heaven and punish evil and promote good. To live in accordance with the serious teachings of our predecessors. Lin almost went crazy seeing all this. She thought that Chen had suffered brain damage after being hit, but seeing how confidently he was talking about it, she hesitated. It wasn't like he was faking it. The bikers were also confused. One walked up to Qian and asked, could this guy be some kind of hidden cultivator? Would it be worth the risk for him? And Qian replied that he was talking nonsense. Qian punched his brother and started yelling that he was an idiot, and this was reality, not a novel. He got angry about the situation. Chen turned to Lin and told her the girl not to worry. In the Tang Dynasty realm, such evil people would never be allowed to do evil. He also told her to wait here for a while and he would go over and defeat those evil people so she would be safe. She was puzzled as to why this guy was suddenly so polite. Could it be that he was killed by Lin and then became a possessed Taoist priest from the Tang Dynasty? But Qian didn't stop. He swore and shouted that he had enough of getting on his nerves. He called for his gang to finish him off. Chen was ready. He was calm. Not a single muscle trembled on his face. He even smiled a little and waited, and the fighters came closer and closer. Two of the crowd rushed at Chung with fists and tried to knock him down. A third came from the other side, another from behind. But they were all met with a rebuff they never expected. They all went flying in different directions. Two of them could not get up. One of them began to choke. Chen was showing the wonders of combat. He kicked Qian in such a way that he flew off and all his body parts crunched. The leader lay on the ground defeated and unable to move. He could not utter a word, and then he threw back his head and fell silent. Chen pounced on the rest of the gang. Some of them tried to resist him, but in vain, while others sluggishly waved him away. He scattered them like little bugs, but they only flew up into the air, tumbled there, and fell into the wildly growing shrubbery. Those who were not involved in the battle began to interject that it was like they were making martial arts movies here. Even Special Forces fighters couldn't do that. They didn't want to be beaten. One of the members of the biker group fell to his knees and began to apologize. He said that he had made a big mistake and would not dare to do anything bad again. And he asked the Taoist priest for mercy. Chen stood in front of him and said that people who are not saints and sages may have many faults, and the sea of suffering is boundless. If they sincerely repent, let them make a vow. He also said that God values the virtue of life and reached forward with his hand on which the bacterium was hiding. He said the word forward, then said the words, "Can go," and the bacteria rushed forward. The boy thanked Chung and hurried away, but Chen continued and mouthed that now it was their turn to cleanse the world of filth. It was their time. One of the guys told his buddies that if they did the same, he would let them go too. And everyone began to say that they were right about her, that they were ready to make an oath, calling Chen master. Chen uttered, "Go." that they could all go, pointed his hand at them, and bacteria flew off his hands. And the bandits, as they ran away, one of them shouted that this Taoist priest was very foolish because you could go back, call more people, and massacre him. Chung thought that the acting skills of those people were too bad, and the thoughts were written on their faces. They will die of diarrhea soon, but God will know that those people really weren't killed by me, it's all the damn germs. Ling came up to Chen and asked him if he realized he should have called the police. The guy just shrugged his shoulders in response. She said they should have delayed them. But he replied that God believes that everyone can change if they ask. We should give him another chance. Lin asked the elder's name to thank him. Chen wondered if he had just gotten $1 million from her, and now she wanted to reward him again. The guy figured it wasn't that simple. She was testing him. The young man said he had a first and last name given to him by the master, that his surname is Ping Dao and his first name is Cham. Then Lin noticed that the Taoist priest must have made a mistake. If she remembered correctly, he should have the surname Wu and the first name Qi. Chen became indignant. He had gone out to save her, and he wasn't going to harm other people. And there's nothing to accuse him of lying. Then Lin said for Chen Haoshan to come down to earth already. The Tang dynasty hasn't existed for a long time. But added that the Tang dynasty was of course ruled by an emperor, and she thought these words were already enough to prove that this particular Taoist priest had traveled through hundreds of years. Chen laughed and said that he felt that the atmosphere was too tense, so he was obliged to act out the time travel drama. And he was doing all this for Lin's sake. Lin resented Chen for acting like this. She reminded him that he had just asked for money. She had believed him, hadn't she? The girl crouched down beside him and asked if he could imagine how worried she was because she thought she had killed him. And Lin picked up her baton and walked towards Chen. Chen realized that the matter was taking a serious turn. He had already realized that Lin didn't like to joke. Lin was very angry at Chen's behavior, even though he had helped her. Things could have been different if he hadn't lied to her. Chen realized he had to do the legwork and ran away. She stood in the middle of the road, angry with a club in her hands, and shouted Chen Haoshan's name with all her might, cursing him. She realized that he had run away. She was really tired from everything that had happened. Lin lowered her head. She decided that she should go back to the car, continuing to resent Chen. Chen ran and thought that he really shouldn't have gotten this far, that she wasn't that bad, and it would be better for her if she stopped constantly making that face like the whole world owed her money. At night, Chen got home, went in, turned on the light, and he thought that he hadn't practiced for the last 2 days because of all the idiotic things he had to do. He sat down to meditate, determined to see how far he could get in a short period of time. But he quickly exhausted himself and lay down on the bed, thinking that that was it for today. He thought that if the old man knew at that moment that he was letting himself be lazy, he would come out of his grave and start scolding him. The next day, Cloud Fuyang Company started its work. People hurried to make sure they weren't late. The building was shining. Lin came to work very sad and thoughtful. She didn't even want to talk to anyone. Yao Yao came up to her and asked her if someone had made fun of her, why her eyes were so red. Lin replied that no one had hurt her. She just felt a little bad. Yao Yao assumed it was because of the marriage. All these years, the sisters had overcome all the difficulties together, and Yao Yao couldn't believe that they wouldn't succeed this time. Lin said that although the relationship between the family and Su Xiaolin is said by her father to be a life-threatening friendship, without it, there would be no company of her father today. Yao Yao said she has candidates to choose from, but they're all a little unreliable, and a reliable person is needed. Lin replied that she too felt that it was not easy to find the right person. And then Lin asked her sister what she thought of Cheng Haoqian. Yao Yao was very surprised by this unexpected question. She freaked out and asked if she wanted him to pretend to be her boyfriend. Lin replied that she felt he recognized money, but not people, and they were running out of time. Su Xiaolei recently finished exploring the market in the United States and should be back soon. Yao Yao protested. She said that even to serve coffee is an unreliable person. And then the call from Lin's mother rang out. Mom said that Sue had returned from the US and that everyone was going to dinner tomorrow night. Lin asked if anything was wrong. Her mother said she wouldn't say anything in advance, but Lin wasn't a child anymore, so she had to be sensible. Next, her mother said that her father's situation was very bad and it was best to let him go happy. Lin said she understood and cried. She couldn't calm down for a long time, but then she pulled herself together. Lin told Yao Yao that the situation seemed to have taken a turn for the worse because Su Xiaolei had already returned from the United States. Next, Lin started yelling that they didn't have time to discuss this at all anymore, and so she asked to hurry up and get Chung. Yao Yao immediately agreed. Lin thought he had pretty good acting skills, and if he could pretend to be in meetings like he did yesterday, she still had some hope. In the meantime, Chen was cleaning the building, wanting to sleep and guessing at nothing. Yao Yao followed him and told him to follow her to the president's office. They want to see him there. Yao Yao added that her sister was there and she had something to talk to him about. Chen was confused but followed Yao Yao. Yao Yao led Chen to her sister, told her she'd done everything she'd asked, and Chen looked questioningly at Lin through the open door. Chen entered the office, said hello, and asked what had happened that was so important that the vice president was asked to bring him in person. Lin replied to be serious. He was called on business. Lin asked, how long had he known who she was? How long had he been pretending? She asked the questions very seriously. The young man said that he knows that he is the head of our company as a very famous man and he found out a long time ago. She asked by found out a long time ago. Does he mean last night? Did he hear it from that guy? Chen interrupted, interjecting, wondering if Miss Lin had called him and invited him to talk over such a trifle. Lin said he was here so they could settle the $1,000,000 Chen had gotten from her yesterday for nothing. The guy said she was the one who hit him. He thought he had said goodbye to his life. He thought it was fair that he was compensated for moral damages. Once the money gets into his pocket, it doesn't come back to him anymore. Lin thought that according to the law, the amount for moral damages could not be $1,000,000. Chen thought that according to the law, it could be a gift, and he could not return it. Miss said she's sure he knows a lot about the law, but she guarantees Chen won't win a lawsuit against her. Chen frowned and wondered if she was threatening him. He wasn't scared at all, though. It was even fun. She said that she wasn't going to threaten, and he may not give her the money back, but he would have to do something for her instead. The young man said he was sure she was a generous person and kind. In that case, he wondered how he could help her. Lin said that she's having a party at her house tomorrow, and he has to act as her boyfriend at the party. She's sure he'll do well because he impressed her with his acting yesterday. Chen was surprised that he would have to impersonate her boyfriend. He even asked again. Lin replied that it was correct. The guy said that with his background and looks, no one would believe he was her boyfriend. Lin replied that she didn't care if other people believed it or not, but she needed him to be there. He also said he would get a friend to help him. He knows better than him, and he's just a janitor. Yao Yao didn't hesitate to sneer that his friends weren't much better than him. Lin held out a bank card with 20,000 yuan on it. Chen was to use it to dress for dinner, and she would be waiting for him downstairs tomorrow at 6 o'clock sharp. Chen was happy that he would get paid for it and wondered why he hadn't been told about it before. He assured Lin that actors like him were movie stars. Lin shouted for him to go buy clothes. The guy replied, looking at his sneakers, that she would surely see that she had made the right choice. Yao Yao hesitantly asked her sister if she was sure they had made the right decision. Lin replied that she was sure. Chen went to a huge supermarket where you can buy absolutely everything, including clothes. He went to an expensive store, dressed in it, and spent so much money that he was thanked for going in. Chen, looking in the mirror, thought that it had been a long time since he had worn a formal suit, and how he missed it. When he was dressed, he received a phone call. He heard Tintin's voice asking for an urgent meeting. She said it was very important. Chen asked if it could wait. Tintin replied that the matter was not bearable, and if he could make it work, she would be very grateful. She is now in the People's Hospital. Chen promised to be there as fast as he could get there. Chen drove the car up to the People's Hospital and got out. Tintin was waiting for him at the entrance. She rushed to him with eyes full of tears. He asked what was wrong and tried to calm her down. Tintin said her mom's surgery wasn't very successful, and the doctor said she needed to prepare for radiotherapy or something similar. She wanted to ask him to lend her some more money. Chen replied that he couldn't give her as much because of the bank's restrictions, but he would transfer it to her account at school as soon as he could. Ting said that this time, not much is needed, only 50,000 yuan. Chen sent them immediately, and even a little more just in case. He then said that while the bank was processing the transaction, could he see her mom? Tintin thanked him, but said her mom was still in a coma and might not be able to talk to him. Chen said it's okay, he just wants to see her. Maybe there's something he can do to help. Tintin thanked him, told him he was a very nice man, and they went to the inpatient ward of the hospital. Chen said it's a rare case where he's a good guy, so he'll be a good guy until the end. As they entered the mother's room, he asked what kind of cancer Tintin's mom had, how advanced was it. The girl replied that it was in the last stage. Chen said that he needed to tell Tintin that she should prepare for the fact that there was no way to cure mom. Ting lowered her head, and Chen continued, if it is a terminal stage, even $1 million, let alone 200,000 yuan, will not save her. Tintin said that she was raised by her mom alone, and she knows how she suffered and how hard it was for her. She doesn't know if she can save her mom, but as long as she's alive, Tintin will be happy for at least one more day. Tintin also said that otherwise she wouldn't have a family in this world at all. Chen stroked her head and said that he knew how Tintin felt, and he really understood her. He said the person closest to him left him. Maybe that's why he wants to help the girl. They entered the ward. Tintin went in first, followed by Chen. He looked around and looked carefully at Tintin's mother. Chen stood and thought that Ting's mother's name was Ding Qiu Yun, so it looks like Ting Ting took her mother's surname. It seems likely that Tintin is an illegitimate child, but that didn't change anything for Chen. He approached the Tintin mother and told her that she had done an excellent job raising the child alone. Chen asked Tintin where she usually sleeps. He guessed that it was here, but she replied that the ward space was very expensive, and he realized that she sleeps on the floor. So he decided to move his mother to a separate ward. He then asked that Tintin take him to the attending physician, and off they went. Tintin wanted to refuse, but Chen said there was no other option, and he would pay for everything. Chen went in to see the doctor, and the doctor asked why Chen hadn't shown up for a long time. It was painful for them to see that such a frail girl was looking after such a heavy patient day and night. The doctor said the girl was very tired and would probably faint before the patient got better. Chen said that he had been on a business trip for a while, and Tintin hadn't told him anything because she was worried about him. But he came as soon as he found out. Chen said that his absence these days had caused problems for Dr. Yang, so he wanted to take care of Tintin and her mother now. Then the doctor said that since you've already heard everything from Tintin, they can talk. Tintin was silent, Chen was talking. Chen wanted to talk to the doctor alone and told Tintin to wait for him. The doctor asked what their relationship was with Tintin. Chen replied that he was a distant cousin. The doctor said the most optimistic prognosis is that the patient will live no more than a year. Chen asked, "Is there really no chance of a cure?" And thought that it probably wasn't that easy if even the old bastard with his medical skills and techniques probably didn't stand a chance. The doctor said that mid to late stage cancer is a barrier that modern medicine cannot overcome, so there is nothing we can do. Chen said he understood and would talk to Tintin about the future. It might be better for her to accept reality. When Chen left the doctor's office, he said he'd go to his aunt's room. She should lock the doors and not let anyone in. Tintin tried to find out what the doctor said, but Sen didn't say anything, he thought. Tintin asked, "What is he going to do?" But Chen didn't answer anything either. Before entering the ward, Chung told Tintin not to worry and just trust him.